All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the New Jersey Globe's 2023 post-election live stream. You may have seen our pre-election live stream where we tried to tell you what might happen. Now you get to see us tell you what did happen. So I am Joey Fox. I am theoretically the New Jersey Globe's DC reporter, although you would never know it from the last few weeks. With me is David Wildstein, the editor of the New Jersey Globe. Micah Rasmussen, the director of the Rebovich Institute for New Jersey Politics at Rider University.
Rider, thank you, Joey, getting that in.
And Ryan Dubicki, who is an elections analyst at the Associated Press. So it was a fascinating election night, as all election nights in New Jersey are. I think that the overarching theme that we're all going to probably repeat a lot tonight is that Democrats went into the night scared, Republicans went into the night optimistic, and that did not turn out that way. Democrats ended up gaining who knows how many seats. That's one of the first things we're going to talk about tonight. Everybody was saying that they gained a net 5 seats. They flipped 6 seats, and then Republicans flipped 1. Even that comes with an asterisk because it was Sam Thompson's deeply Republican seat that was Democratic hell because he switched parties. And I think that the very first thing that we're going to dive into is that they might gain a 7th. There were additional votes added today in the 8th legislative district. I think we're still trying to get clarity on exactly what those votes were. No one expected these votes to be added. I assume that it's maybe some late arriving mail-in votes or some uncounted votes. I don't think we quite know yet, but it puts Democrat Andrea Katz in a 27 vote lead for a seat in the 8th legislative district, which is mostly Burlington County. And, you know, this race had already been called for Republicans by us, by the AP, by everybody. So this is a pretty big shot. So that's what I'm going to start off with. What are you guys looking at with that?
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, the fact that we don't know where all these votes are is unsettling, to say the least, because the new law says we're supposed to know. That was the whole point of the law. And, I'll quickly go into, the Seinfeld take, which is it's not enough to pass the law. You got to follow the law. But anyway, here are the numbers is right now, Katz is at 27,037, Umba at 27,10. Angelini is running about 190 votes or so behind Katz. Mike Torrisi doesn't, seems to be fine. He's at 27,502. So here's what
to clarify for people who have not been following this race incredibly closely. We've got 2 incumbent Republican assemblymen, Michael Torrisi and Brandon Umba, and then 2 Democratic challengers who were thought to be underdogs before the election, Andrea Katz, who's a Democratic municipal chair, and Anthony Angelozzi, who is a teachers union president. So just to provide a baseline here for who we're talking about.
Right. And so here's what we know is a Democrat has now taken a 27 vote lead. And we know that there are 675 uncounted provisional ballots. 600 of them are in Burlington County and 75 of them are in Atlantic County. Burlington being more Democratic. Katz and Angelozzi carried Burlington, and Atlantic, which is Hamilton, was a big win for the Republicans, Torrisi and Umba. We also know that there's 216 uncounted vote by mails in Atlantic, but I'm told tonight that Burlington seems to be caught up. Now, remember a couple things. One is vote by mails postmarked by 8 p.m. on Tuesday, November 7th, will be counted as long as they arrive at the Board of Elections by Monday close of business. So these are not Dropbox ballots. These are not, you can't vote late. This is simply accounting for slow mail trucks. There's going to be some ballots that'll straggle in still. Tomorrow's a holiday, right? Tomorrow is no post office, so they won't get any tomorrow. So they should get a batch on Monday, and then they could get some on Saturday if they open up. Please, election officials, go in and get your mail on Saturday. But what we'll know is Monday, so they won't begin counting the provisionals until at least Tuesday. And among the reasons for that is some people who received, and this is just one reason why people vote provisionally, if they received an automatic vote by mail ballot and they didn't return it, or they don't remember returning it, or they forgot about it and they lost it, and they come into a polling place, they can't vote on the machine if they are recorded as receiving a vote by mail. So they have to vote provisionally. And then what they have to do is, once this deadline runs out, then they go and they check the provisionals, and they literally go vote by vote, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans in each county, and they decide, which ones are immediately disqualified. Some people may not be registered voters. There's a lot going on here, and I have always believed that provisional ballots mirror election day in person, because these are people who are coming into a polling place and their intention is to vote on a machine, and for some reason they can't. But that's not taking into account how many people are voting provisionally because they lost their VBM. So, and Ryan, you know exponentially more than I do about this stuff. I mean, Democrats, the votes that are being the ballots that were mailed out to Democrats were significantly more than Republicans.
Yeah, no, roughly. I don't have the exact percentages, but I think like 65 or 2/3 of the mail votes have favored Democrats. And historically, I'm pulling up this data right now. Historically, I don't have this data from 2021, but I have from 2022. They were. In 2022, there were 550,691 mail ballots received by the county clerks. And then compared to E+6, we're at 583. So roughly, if I do the math, that's 33,000 mail votes added between Election Day and the grace period of Monday E+6 is our nomenclature, David. So obviously this election could be slightly different. More people could have mailed their ballots later than in 2021, especially with a lower profile election like this. But historically, I only have 2022 data on that. I don't have 2021. The late arrival mail ballots made up less than 2% of the total vote. This might be a different case this election. And that's also based on the statewide vote, not specific to like LD8 or any other district races. But this is obviously a shock for us. And I will be looking at our vote history logs to see what happened on election night and stuff, see what kind of votes we think are in. But it's hard to tell because on Burlington's website, they're not giving any vote types. They're not breaking out the votes by mail, election day, in-person early voting, and provisional, unlike other counties. So it's hard to see, what these votes are exactly. Maybe we'll get some intel on it later on. But I think, as of now, if things stand like 2022, we're looking at roughly 6,000 more mail ballots because on E+1 in 2022, we're at 576 compared to 583 official. So 20,000 mail ballots arrived after Election Day, and then the day after, between 24 hours later in 2022. It just might be slightly more than that. We'll find out. But obviously, since the beginning, Democrats have had this mail voting advantage, which this could explain these are likely mail votes being added to this race that we at AP didn't catch, and neither did you guys. And one reason is because typically Burlington counts a lot of votes on election night, usually almost all their mail-ins, based on what I remember. And it's also hard because we don't know the exact ballot breakout with mail votes, election day votes, and early votes. But yes, this is a surprise. I agree.
And one of the things that's important to just point out is first of all, Merry Christmas to election lawyers, because 2 lucky winners on each side are going to make some money that they on Tuesday night said, oh wow, no real recounts here. So there's a lot to happen before we know the outcome of this race, because just because these VBMs are in, or these late VBMs are in, the provisionals are in, doesn't mean they're all going to be counted. I mean, in the sense that there may be challenges to them. The signature doesn't match. We've seen lawsuits about whether they actually lived there. Now they're going to go and they're going to start to really drill down. Now they've got to go look at all these provisionals and start to challenge voters. They might have to look at other vote by mail. The experience here, unfortunately, is we're not getting instant gratification on this stuff. We're going to be looking for a while, and they've got a little bit of a clock going in the sense that the legislators are sworn in the second week in January. I don't mean to say that this is a disaster. Maybe this will go smoothly, but the reality is races like this can sometimes hit the courts. And when they hit the courts, it slows down depending upon the judges. If this goes to Judge Michael Blee in Atlantic, we're gonna zoom through this. If this goes to another judge, it could be in Burlington, it could be a completely different story. But once it's stopped, for the first step would be to do a recount, and only after the recount is completed will they be in a position to then challenge ballots and challenge the results. You're hitting Thanksgiving. You're going to have election officials. It's the kind of thing where I start to lose it a little bit. You guys all, are more even tempered than I am, but they're going to say, well, we've got Thanksgiving and everybody's tired and people are taking, and I'm not just, election workers work really hard. They are frontline heroes when it comes to this process, but they're tired. They have been working overtime for weeks, and some of them have vacation days. Some of them have plans. That recount doesn't necessarily happen as soon as the judge orders it. So we could be looking at a protracted process. The bottom line is it's not affecting control of the legislature.
So one more thing, and this will not fall into instant gratification, but in the two models that you talked about, either the VBMs, the theory that many of the provisionals may have been VBM voters, or that there are 600 in the Burlington where UMBA actually lost to Katz by almost 2,000 in the county. Neither one of those scenarios would suggest that the 600, which is the biggest pool of uncounted votes right now, the 600 provisional votes, neither one of those should theoretically be UMBA-rich. Should it be a batch of UMBA-rich ballots? Now, if it's in his neighborhood in Medford, that's a different story. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But you would think that perhaps these could be more Katz-friendly votes. On the other hand, 27 votes is not a lot to make up either way, right? So we're not talking about a lead of 100 or 200. We're talking about something that could be reversed very easily.
Yeah. And I remember when in the district next door, in the second district, when Vince Mazzio first won in 2013, I think it was 55 votes. And they didn't have that done till after Thanksgiving. Andrew Zwicker was it, Joey, like 70 something votes. Yeah. So this does happen. You sometimes get these really, really tight races. It's just, what is surprising is on election night. I remember when I called this race, UMBA was up about 875, 900 votes. That was comfortable enough with the percentage of votes that they were showing in. So we'll see. This is going to be this is unexpected, and I really hope. And I think it's important for I know some of the election officials watch this because they call afterwards and talk about it. It's important that the public be reassured, that there be transparency here as to how these votes came in, because you don't want to start seeing conspiracy theories about votes suddenly showing up after the election. There is, and I can't stress enough, absolutely, positively, no signs of anything wrong here, right. But the election officials need to quickly be transparent and explain exactly what happened.
Yeah, David, the classic example of the close race is the other direction next door, Legislative District 7.
Yeah,
Ken Faulkner versus Jack Connors. That vote was so close, and there were so many problems with that. Of course, this is the 90s, that there was actually a new election.
Right.
So, I think the one thing that I'll add to this is, so I'll pull up a map quickly. Regardless of how this race shakes out, regardless of what the actual outcome is, it's going to be extremely close either way. And that in itself is pretty unexpected. I mean, I wrote a story. This map is from a story that I wrote at the beginning of the year saying, like, after a really competitive 2021 contest, will this district be competitive again this year? My conclusion was basically, probably not. It was a district that was redrawn to be more Republican. Republicans had just won it. They had beat incumbent Democratic Senator Don Adiego, who's a party switcher. So Democrats had never actually won the district, but they did hold it. Republicans beat her by a couple points. Brandon Umba and Mike Teresi were elected by a couple points more. And then the district was redrawn to be something like 3 points more Republican. And so the conclusion was kind of like, well, this district will probably continue to host somewhat competitive races going forward, but what exactly would change this year that wasn't true in 2021 that could create a Democratic victory? And you can see here, it is a district that supported Jack Ciattarelli by 9 points in the 2020 governor's race. So even if Andrea Katz ends up falling short by 50 votes or something, that's still an extremely impressive performance.
Yeah. It is. If I remember that story correctly, Joey, we said that Andrea Katz had some potential.
Yeah. You don't get the license plate for a strong performance. And that's Hey, Ryan, are you able to see what the Senate race margin is now with these new votes?
Let me pull that up in our
tabulation database. And I'll tell you why Ryan's looking at this. The closeness of this race is fascinating when you think about, what caused a lot of the problems in the building trades. Latham Tiver, the senator-elect, I think, unless Ryan tells me he's not, but Latham
he's ahead by something like more than 1,000 votes. So I think,
I mean, right, he's going to be fine. But the issue,
he's up by over 2, actually, 22, 23. Yeah.
So the conflict there was that Bill Mullen of the building trades, which is Bill Mullen, an extension of George Norcross and Steve Sweeney, went and was mailing Democrats in the 8th district to get them to become forever vote by mail voters. They were expanding that base. If Andrea Katz pulls this off, she ought to erect a statue of Mickey Quinn on her front lawn because it was tactics like that changing their, not just accepting the status quo, but changing their luck that is even making this race close at all.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that this was not a race that South Jersey Democrats prioritized quite as much as a couple of other races, but it was one that they did put some serious effort into. They did spend money on it. They did do that vote by mail program. And I mean, if you win by 27 votes, if that's what the final margin ends up being, then every tiny thing that led to that is what caused it, because that's such a ridiculously small margin. And so they may have played their cards perfectly for this one seat. I mean, obviously this is sort of an indication that if they had played even harder for it, they could have won more. Yeah. But
Gay Burton is now up 438 votes in Burlington County. Presumably she's still behind in Atlantic, but she has gone up in Burlington.
Which is sort of an interesting dynamic to this race in general. I mean, obviously every town in this district counts equally, every vote counts equally, but this is a Burlington district and Democrats are winning the Burlington portion. It's got Hamilton, Mullica, Egg Harbor City, and Folsom in Atlantic County. 3 of those 4 are pretty deep red. And so that's just that's this little extra credit that the GOP gets that, as it turns out, is really important.
Yeah. So she is still down 1,800 in Atlantic. So that would make her at 1,500 district wide, which is closer than what we had. We had her at 2,300 behind before. So,
and she was, for context, everybody, she is the candidate who the South Jersey Democrats basically abandoned. She was a last minute replacement candidate who beat the South Jersey's preferred nominee at a county convention in an upset. And then from there, South Jersey Democratic leadership was just like, we don't want to deal with that. She's not one of ours. We don't want anything to do with that. And so they spent, so the assembly candidates were running a much more active campaign and had a lot more money behind them.
Well, I'll tell you, if Brandon Umba, pulls this out, I think he probably will, but as I'm going to look for some more numbers now, but if he pulls it out, he needs to call Al Barlas and say thank you, thank you, thank you. Would you prefer seating where my desk in the assembly chamber? Would you like any of my leadership money? Would you are my committee assignments possible? If Brandon just got married recently, or or engaged, but firstborn comes to mind here. This is the
Love
guy.
Yeah,
this is going to be a guy who's going to owe Al Barlas big time because of those little towns that got added that really nobody was objecting to.
Yeah.
I'd want to say for this is 2022, which, as we're learning, might not be the most relevant, most comparable. But in 2022, only 55 mail ballots arrived after E+1, the day after Election Day. So between E+1 and Monday E+6, only 55 mail ballots arrived and were counted in Burlington then. And for provisionals, this is 2021. There were 2,698 provisionals counted for the governor's race. Murphy won 56% of that. And that number is 1,505. So even provisional voting in Burlington County specifically has favored Democrats in the past, based on 2021. And that was because Burlington provided vote types in 2021, and they are not this year. But that's how we were able to break out the vote that way. In the election vote in Burlington, Chiarelli won 54% versus 45% Murphy. So even provisional voting in a more not as Democratic county has favored Democrats more. Statewide provisional vote, Murphy won 56%. So the Burlington County margin provisionals matches up statewide as well.
The one caveat with it is that this is the more Republican half of Burlington. Burlington is basically split in half between two legislative districts, and this is the more Republican half. But that is still an indication that the provisional votes may be more Democratic leaning than the election day votes, which I feel like, I wonder if these provisional votes are just going to kind of split down the middle 50-50, and then you're going to end up with still an incredibly close race in one direction or the other at the end. Should we talk about some races that are not LD8?
We should.
So I think that the next big race to talk about, and there's a really exciting race that we're going to spend lots of time on in LD30, but I think that the next good race to talk about as a segue from LD8 is LD3. That, I think, is that and one other district, I think, LD11, I think, are the two big sort of real Democratic statements of the night. This is the district that Steve Sweeney controlled until 2021. He lost to an unknown truck driver named Ed Durr. Everyone who is watching this live stream knows that story. Yes, you do. And Democrats flipped it back. Democrats looked at Ed Durr, looked at his Cinderella story, looked at all of the press around him and said, we're going to beat that. And they did. This is a Trump. There's not just a Jack Ciattarelli one district. This is a Trump one district. And former Assemblyman John Berzicelli beat Durr by 6 percentage points. And the assembly race is a bit closer, but Gloucester County Commissioner Heather Simmons and Dave Bailey, who's a Salem County nonprofit guy, have won the 2 assembly seats as well. So this went from all Democratic in 2021 or before 2021 to all Republican for 2 years, and now it's back to all Democratic. What were kind of your guys' initial reactions to this on election day when you were watching these votes come in, when you sort of saw that the South Jersey Democratic machine was not dead, George Norcross is not retired?
Not. No, I mean, what we're looking at here. First of all, Joey, I have a question for you, and I don't mean to put you on the spot because we haven't looked at these things, but are there any other legislative districts in the state besides 30, which is an outlier that we will talk about, that Donald Trump won in a that will be represented by a Democratic state senator?
No, there's even very few districts that Joe Biden won by less than 10 points that Democrats will hold. In general, the general trend of the New Jersey legislature, as anyone who follows the state closely will know, is that, at least in recent years, the Democratic totals in statewide races are not trustworthy for legislative races, because usually Democrats will do significantly better in a presidential race or in a U.S. Senate race than they'll be able to do in like assembly races. There's districts that Joe Biden won by almost 20 points. Well, there's one of those that Republicans still control in the legislature. I mean, this is a very shifted playing field, except for LD3 and except for South Jersey in general. South Jersey has always been a little bit of the exception to that rule. And in 2021, sort of political reality finally caught up with Democrats a bit, and Republicans flipped these districts. But now Democrats are showing well, that was more of a fluke than anything else. I mean, this is Trump won territory, but we can flip this back. We've got that machinery in place. We've got these vote by mail ballots. We can do this. And they did.
Yeah. And what you have here, first of all, well-run campaign by the Democrats, both on the hard side and the soft side. And Berzicelli, good candidate. They weren't really able to tag him. I'm going to hear from somebody about this tomorrow, and they're not going to be happy. But the reality is, I think Berzicelli was a stronger candidate against Durr than Steve Sweeney would have been in a matchup. Because Berzicelli, there weren't the negatives on Berzicelli, and there wasn't that leadership record of supporting issues that they might have been able to do this. I think Durr might have been better off in a runoff, but what you had here is an extraordinary gap in spending, and you had a good candidate in Berzicelli, and you had a really well executed vote by mail effort where and George Norcross gets props here, and and Mickey Quinn and the whole team there, because this is another situation like 8 where they changed they said, well, I don't like how the model looks, so let's just get a new model. And it was this is a data driven long operation that began when the new map came out, where they said, we've got a problem if we maintain the status quo, so let's not maintain the status quo. They put a lot of money on TV. We don't know what issues worked. I mean, there was a powerful ad done by Loretta Weinberg, which doesn't matter whether it was Loretta Weinberg or anybody else. This is, was a grandmother talking about Ed Durr's record on abortion and things that he said about sexual assault. There's, it could have been anybody, and this was a powerful message. But Loretta Weinberg knows how to deliver a message, and I'm told it didn't take her that many takes to get this one down, which doesn't surprise me at all. So this is, would I have been surprised if Durr won? Not at all. Because of the numbers that Joey cited, but I'm not surprised that Berzicelli won it also. And what's interesting here is this assembly race was fairly close, and Beth Ann McCarthy,
Patrick.
God, why am I zoning? Beth Ann.
Just David, you're not going to like it that I'm going to say this publicly, but just so everybody knows, David,
don't say it. But go ahead. You're gonna.
The dual last name doesn't work with David Wildstein's brain. Just now everybody knows. Now everybody has seen it live in action. Beth Ann McCarthy Patrick.
It happens, but the more important point that I'm hoping to make here is that Brandon Umba was leading by more votes on election night than Dave Bailey was, and unless I haven't, I think Ryan's probably going to check his District 3 numbers right now, but this was a closer race than 8. And
it's less than 1,000 votes.
And so one of the questions, and by the way, these are questions we'll never know. We'll never know the answer, which is if there wasn't a civil war in Gloucester County, if Durr didn't have a primary, if it was Beth Sawyer against John Berzicelli, we could come up with a whole bunch of different scenarios, but the bottom line is the Democrats, they flipped a district that they probably shouldn't have lost to begin with, but it became worse in redistricting. You have to remember, the whole sequence of events here, which is Sweeney loses, and the Democrats throw him off the redistricting commission. So if Sweeney hadn't lost the race, he would have been sitting at the table objecting to any map that might have made conditions worse in District 3 and District 4 and District 8.
And not only did they throw him off, but then they gave the Republicans pretty much what they wanted in those districts.
Right, because it was the two different factions, and then the Republicans got, whatever, all the work that they had done pre-election day 2021 on redistricting had to be thrown out. They had to restart it because they now had incumbents in District 3 that they needed to protect.
Right.
And, and all of the, and they unloaded Millville into Bridgeton into District, from 3 into 1.
Yeah.
And they made one more Democratic and it like barely, I mean, like Testa didn't care because he was, he's strong. And now here's a guy who took the Van Drew district. And I'm just going to go off, one district over just for a second. But Mike Testa took that district that had been a Democratic district for, Van Drew was there 17 years. And this is now solid. He won 60% of the vote. And, so you're seeing the changes in South Jersey, but they got 3 back. And, and now they have to look at, where this is going to be in 2 years, because Simmons and Bailey won't have Berzicelli on the ticket, and
they also won't have Durr to sort of run against.
They don't,
right.
And Durr, he really, he was the same guy. So he, that he was when he got elected. I think there was, there were some aspects of Ed Durr who said, well, the people like me, they, I'm Ed the trucker. They know me, I'm not really worried about it. I wasn't up on TV last time.
That's exactly right.
And he thought that everything would just continue as they were. And I don't think he saw what, I don't think he saw they didn't run this campaign in District 3. That's why Sweeney lost. They didn't take it seriously. When they take it seriously, this was a different outcome. But
politicians are oftentimes some of the worst people in the world to understand why they themselves win. It's just something I've noticed in general. You see it sometimes. You saw it this year with Sam Thompson in the 12th district when he switched parties from Republican to Democrat. And I mean, he eventually came to the conclusion that he couldn't win, and so he retired instead of running for re-election as a Democrat. But for the first couple of weeks there, he was saying, well, I've won re-election by huge margins all these years. Why wouldn't all the voters stick with me? Maybe not. I mean, maybe that was just sort of a front. Maybe that was a little bit of a bluff. But it spoke to sort of not fully understanding the way that voter behavior really works and how voters think about these candidates, if they think about them at all, which in many cases they don't really. They're just voting for a party. They're voting for someone who, okay, they're a Democrat, so they probably support abortion access or whatever it may be. So I've never heard of them, but click. And I think that you saw it a little bit with Durr too, where, he beat the incumbent Senate president. He was drowned in accolades of how did he do this? How is he this amazing come from behind victor? And maybe didn't fully get that, like, that wasn't just because everybody absolutely loves Ed Durr and will always do so. It requires a lot of work to specifically keep that. Yeah. And it doesn't seem like he really did that.
Yeah. And by the way, I don't think the Ed the trucker voters voted in a low turnout election.
So,
and a lot of Ed the trucker's fans aren't in the 3rd legislative district of New Jersey.
Yeah.
So in Cumberland, Ed Durr, Testa performed for him, and Bridgeton performed for him. Ed Durr won Cumberland by 1,000 votes over Berzicelli. And in Salem, Durr carried by 1,000 votes over Berzicelli. It was only in Gloucester that Berzicelli made up that difference and wound up winning the county by about 6,000 votes. And that's what gave him the election. So, you talk about the modeling, that's where the Democrats knew that they had the votes to make up there.
And Salem was overwhelmingly Durr in 2021, and Republicans only came out with about a 1,400 so difference. Of course, it's also always important to point out for everybody in the state that Salem County is about the size of Old Bridge.
Right. One other number that struck me about this race is that Ed Durr underperformed relative to his assembly running mates by about 1,500 votes. And you can really see the impact of the negative advertising and the sustained campaigning against him that just disqualified him to that many more voters than even his running mates.
Yeah.
He also, I would say he also underperformed just with overall election day turnout. And I say that because I'm looking at, comparing numbers from 2021, and, in that district, there were 76,000 ballots cast in the new LD3 in 2021, and we're currently at 59,105. But if you look at it in the advance, compared to advance, in 2021, there was 20,823 advance votes in that district. And compared to right now on E+1, because that's the data as of yesterday, we're at 20,322. So, advance voting is, roughly parallel to 2021, but not the total vote, the total turnout. And mail voting specifically, district-wide, we're at 110% in 2021 already. So in a low turnout election, mail turnout is already higher than 2021. So yeah, hats off to Democrats for their operation with already exceeding 2021 expectations.
That's really good. So in other words, the electorate was far more mail than it was on a percentage basis 2 years ago.
Yeah, like in 2021, 20% of the district voted by mail, and this year it's 29%.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's the margin of victory, probably, right
That's
there.
it. That's right.
Okay.
So one thing that I'll bookend this with, just drawing back to your very original point, David, on this district, Steve Sweeney might have indeed done worse than John Berzicelli in this race. I 100% see your argument for that. It's a counterfactual that we'll never know. I still kind of think that he would have won, just because Berzicelli won by 6 points, and assuming the Democrats run a similar campaign, it's hard to imagine that Steve Sweeney is the X factor that leads to a 6-point shift to the right. Who knows? But I imagine that he would have won had he run, which I wonder if he's now thinking, well, dang it. Steve Sweeney wants to run for governor in 2025. Yeah. That is his ultimate goal. And he will be doing so as an ex-defeated Senate president instead of an incumbent state senator.
Yeah. The problem with that, and maybe you're right on that, but Sweeney would have hated going back to the Senate.
Not being Senate president.
In the back row. Yeah. Because he wasn't getting the Senate presidency back.
That is true.
And it's just I don't think it was the right move for him. And Berzicelli, they just ran a good campaign, and they ran a scrappy campaign. Mike Mueller focused on 3 and 4. Looking at data. This is I think when you really when you really dig into these races, you're going to find that the data analytics on the Democratic side, in terms of how they targeted and where they ran ads and what cable networks they ran ads on and who they mailed to and how they did their push operation, how they chased vote by mails. And by the way, I'm sorry, Joey, but just very quickly, the one thing I forgot to leave out in District 8 is now chasing cure letters. For BBMs is going to become hugely important too. And they're going to, they've got these lists by now. So they're going to be out there making sure that their voters, cure any defects in their ballots that wouldn't have been done right. So anyway, I wanted to mention that, but 3 was just a great race, and 3. And then when we talk about 4, it is undoubtedly a big win for George Norcross, because, anybody who counted him out, anybody, I tweeted out that PolitiFact column from the late great Nick Acicella about don't ever bet against George Norcross or Tom Brady. You don't want to bet against him, and this was an important win for him, an important win for the South Jersey machine.
The one more thing that I'll say about this, just as a quippy ending, is that the best thing that ever happened to John Berzicelli is losing re-election in 2021.
Because now he's a senator.
So I think that now we can talk about. So this ended up being one of the big races of the night. It wasn't always clear that it was going to be. It wasn't always guaranteed that Democrats were even going to be able to seriously compete here. That was sort of at the beginning of the year. Democrats and Republicans both weren't entirely sure this would be a competitive district. The district that everybody knew from the very beginning was going to be super competitive is one district over, and that's LD4. This is a district that's part of Gloucester County, part of Camden County, a little bit of Atlantic County. It was redrawn by the Redistricting Commission. Again, the Redistricting Commission that Steve Sweeney got thrown off of and that South Jersey Democrats had no representatives on So the Central and North Jersey Democrats who were on it had no problems with saying, screw it. Let's just make some South Jersey seats harder for Democrats to win. And this was the biggest place where that happened. It was a Murphy +2 district before. It became a Chitterelli +7 district. I mean, this was a blow for Democrats when the map came out. But it ended up, I mean, Democrats ran a really intense, in my opinion, kind of dirty campaign, and it really worked for them. You saw Assemblyman Paul Moriarty beat former Washington Township Councilman Chris Del Borello by 9 points. It's 53-44 right now, with a third-party candidate who we'll definitely talk about taking 3% of the vote. And Moriarty's two running mates, Cody Miller and Dan Hutchison, also winning by a little bit less, but still by all right margins. I mean, this strikes me as the third district is the statement piece, but the fourth district is this is the core result for South Jersey Democrats, who they really needed to win this district to sort of stay relevant in the legislature, and they won it by quite a bit. That was, I guess that's the end of my spiel.
Yeah.
So where the Democratic advantage was 7,000 in District 3, they really ran it up here. Their advantage was well over 10,000 by election day, and they really know how to crank it out. And this is where the habit
advantage
in the advance vote. Yeah,
okay.
Go ahead. Am I wrong about that, Brian? No,
I would just say like District 3. I mean, this is where advanced turnout is strikingly similar to 2021, but total turnout isn't. So it was you know. Logically, there's a slower election day turnout, but same advanced turnout is going to favor Democrats more, and that's exactly what happened. You know, in LD4, you know, in 2021, 36% of the turnout was advanced, and this year it's 45%.
Wow.
So, you know, lower election day turnout, plus the same advanced turnout as the 2 years before. You know, that's a good outcome for Democrats. Absolutely.
So in Atlantic. Del Borello carried that part of the county, the Bunis, by 600 votes, which is, you know, a decent amount coming out of that part of the county. But Moriarty carried Gloucester by very close 100 votes. His assembly running mates did not come out of Gloucester ahead, but he did. And then in Camden, they all gained, in the Camden portion of the district, they all gained over 5,000 votes. Yeah. So that's really where the race was won for them.
Right. But he needed to come out, Del Borello needed to come out of Gloucester with a lot of votes. And I'll tell you, and this is, I'm just, this I think is going to be a theme as we talk about some of these races. But, there are three things that I think we ought to be looking at here. One is candidate quality, and did the Republicans pick the right candidates? Did they recruit correctly? Did they succeed or fail in their choices? Was the money there to win a competitive race, to be able to communicate and for the Republicans beat a Democratic cash advantage on the hard and the soft side, and the three is messaging. The third is messaging. And one of the things, and I guess it's my job to be frank and blunt and say what I think here. I follow Chris Del Borello very closely from the time of the primary. I don't know him that well, but from what I know of him, he seems like a nice guy. He seems like he seems like he dedicated family man. Kids, and he. Active in his community. But one of the things I hear over and over, and I think these election results bear it out, is you have to look at the campaign the Democrats ran against him. They went hard negative on his business, and Chris Del Borello will defend this business. He will, talk about, that things involving his half brother were when he wasn't even there, and in terms of his half brother going to jail over irregularities dealing with this family business, that he came in to sort of set it straight. But one of my takeaways from this district is the business that he was in, which in its worst case scenario described as the trafficking of women, is just a line that people won't accept. And you can't explain away that the Del Borellos own an escort company. They book women to appear at bachelor parties. They're in the entertainment business, and they're sort of on the according to what the Democrats say, on the seedy side of that entertainment business. And and maybe if you were to just sort of stop the clock, go back in time, and do this, we'll never, you can't ever undo a race, and you can't say you should have. Everybody, and when I was on the other side of these things, I hated those Monday morning quarterbacks that said you should have done this and you should have done that, and you screwed this up and you didn't do this right, and I'm always a little hesitant to say that, but I think one of the things that you're seeing here is that Chris Del Borello turned out to not be a great candidate, largely because of the Oppo book and what was there and how they were able to communicate their Oppo book to voters. They painted him in a hugely unflattering way, that wasn't, it wasn't factually incorrect. This is the business they're in. So maybe I think, what if George Geist, if Judge Geist, former senator, former assemblyman, what if he had run? It would, and then they're attacking his votes in the 1990s. But, stand-up guy, it might have been different. Well, we'll never know here. But I think this was a problem with a candidate that, maybe a nice guy, but it was never going to be possible to paint him, to explain away the type of business he was in, especially when you're getting outspent and you're being savaged in TV ads and dark money groups and 527s and IEs. They're just savaging you, and how are you supposed to explain it? No, yeah, we book bachelor parties, and yes, we send women there, but we don't tell them to to take off their clothes. So it's like there's no way to look at that business. And you can say we're capitalists and we believe in free enterprise, and that it's just an honest small business, and if they're not going to do it, somebody else is going to do it. But the reality is, I don't think if you're in that kind of business, you should seek to be a state senator, because I think what you're looking at here is it's just not going to work. And I think that's one of the problems here.
And what made it even harder for him to get out from under it is that, isn't his title like compliance officer? Like, isn't he the person who's supposed to be making sure that everything goes right with the business and that they are on the right side of the law?
By the way, Micah, there's nothing anybody's alleging here that
not at all.
That was illegal. It's just the type of business that they were in. And I think back to that the 2018 Senate campaign, of Bob Hugin and Bob Menendez, and Hugin, again, there, he's a decent human being, but his money was made with a pharmaceutical company that had huge prices, and they were able to paint him as a guy who made his money off the backs of children with cancer. And so, if this was, if they had found some guy for the Senate, I'm going to try and make it like really dull, like he's an accountant and he was a soccer coach, and nobody knew him because nobody knew Chris Del Borello either. If they had taken simply just this blank, sort of a blander story where Steve Askew, who is the best in the business in terms of putting together these books, if Askew had gone to George Norcross and Mickey Quinn and the team and said, wow, I've looked through under every single rock. This guy's like, I don't have anything bad to say about him. Then it could have been a different race. And maybe it would have been good for Republicans maybe even at the state level to say, well, these choices are unacceptable. We have this problem with Nick DeSilvio who ran in the primary. We have this problem with Del Borello. These are not, not the right candidates in a race that's going to be, that we're going to have to invest millions of dollars in.
Yeah, and this is something that we're going to come back to in other districts. I mean, you got the poop guy, right? So
yeah,
and so this is something that's fixable. This is something that Republicans can deal with. It's probably eminently more fixable than retraining their voters to vote by mail, for example, which is another problem that they've got. But this is one that they can pay some attention to and fix their recruitment problems. A lot of Del Borello's stuff had been out there before in prior campaigns, and listen, the Democrats signaled they mailed about this stuff during the primary. So this stuff, and maybe that was too late by then, but they certainly didn't hide what they had on him, and it shouldn't have come as a surprise.
Yeah, and there's just some people where their story is not one that is suited for running for office.
Right.
I'll say it. I've said it to a couple of my friends, like not that I would ever run for office again, but I think that maybe my Oppo book might preclude me from being a good candidate.
Your Oppo book is searching the name Wildstein in the New York Times.
Yeah. By the way, that in personality, would sort of knock me out of there. But I can raise some money. But you look at the assembly candidates there. I think I mean, Matt Walker, good candidate, and he brought the operating engineers 825 to the table, and they invested a lot of money. If Del Borello didn't have the benefit of 825 trying to get an assembly seat for their guy, Matt Walker, you've got to think that margin in what was drawn to be, I think at the very beginning, if anything, sort of a slightly leaning Republican race in this year. I think it would have been you could have had Gopal-esque type of numbers for Moriarty had they not had 825 there. And again, from Republicans, from even some Democrats in South Jersey, I heard incredibly good feedback on Amanda Esposito, a public school teacher who has never run for office before, that she was a really good candidate. And maybe again, armchair quarterback is the easiest job in the world to have. It's why everybody wants it. But you sort of look at it and say, well, what if Amanda Esposito, public school teacher, young woman, had run for the Senate against Paul Moriarty? What were they finding, about her? She gives really hard tests. She's a tough grader. She didn't have, and by the way, if she did, I'm going to start getting text after text from Askew saying, you forgot to say this, and we had this, and we didn't use it, but whatever. Maybe Esposito would have been a stronger candidate. We will never know. I'm told to expect Esposito back. I'm told to expect to see her run for office again, that she was pretty good. And Walker, good candidate, and had that labor backing, but it comes down to the fact that you had a combination here of a, through, not his fault. I'm not saying that Del Borello is a bad guy, but he had a story that made him unelectable, and he didn't have the money to compete with the South Jersey Democratic Organization. And that's what you're seeing here.
So I feel like we should briefly bring up the phantom candidate phenomenon here, where so you had a dark money group, like dark money group gets thrown around a lot, but like a truly dark money group called Jersey Freedom, where we still don't know who's funding it. It has to be South Jersey Democrats. I mean, it seems impossible that it would be anyone else, but we technically don't know because they are a brand new group that technically only spent money they didn't have, and they're going to backfill that money in a report that's going to be filed soon, but we haven't actually seen it. So we don't technically know who is spending this money. But they were running these ads that were partially savaging Del Borello on the same stuff that David has talked about at length here, but also partially boosting Giuseppe Costanzo's conservative South Jersey in the event as an attempt to get a few conservative voters to opt for some random guy who was never going to win instead of Chris Del Borello, who actually had a shot at winning. And I mean, I think that was the most publicly visible part of this campaign. There's a lot of coverage about it from both us and from other news outlets. It didn't seem like it really ended up mattering. I mean, Moriarty got 53% of the vote. That's significantly above a majority, no matter what else is happening beneath him. Giuseppe Costanzo got 3% of the vote. I mean, that's, you could imagine that a big chunk of that 3% would have gone to Del Borello had he not been on the ballot, had he not been funded like this. But then what does that lead to? I mean, Moriarty winning 53 to 45 instead of 53 to 44. Like it ultimately does not seem like it had that much of an impact.
But it's still not right.
No, I mean, it's all still
right.
Very
who he is, and you guys all know how I went down. I lived in a rabbit hole with this guy for a little while, and there are ties to Democrats, and I'm pretty sure I know what's going on. But the reality here is Costanzo didn't get in this to campaign because he didn't act like a candidate. He didn't respond like a candidate. And quite frankly, we'll see more when these reports come out, and we might learn more about Jersey freedom. But, in terms of the circumstances that led to Giuseppe Costanzo being on the ballot, I mean, I'm going to have to admit my own limitations. I think I might have taken this as far as it can go. And I think it might be Matt Platkin who is the only one out there that will be able to finish this game. So, Attorney General Matt Platkin is the Mariano Rivera. And I'm saying this deliberately because he is a Yankee fan. He's the Mariano Rivera here. If there's going to be, and if they're going to figure out this story of who Giuseppe Costanzo is and what the circumstances of his candidacy were, it's going to have to be by people with badges. Otherwise, it's just not going to. It's never going to come out. And just because the election's over doesn't mean that there isn't a significant public interest to seeing what happened here. And yeah, go ahead.
It does still speak to sort of the warped incentives behind a lot of this, and this is especially true with like lower level stuff like filing late campaign finance reports or things like that. Politicians will decide in a lot of circumstances that they would rather win the election first on their terms and then deal with whatever consequences may come afterwards, because at least they've already won the election. And our system is set up to basically encourage that, where, especially with like this stuff that's happening in the frenetic last month of an election, the incentives will always be tilted towards people, breaking the law in major or minor ways beforehand, getting to the finish line, and then figuring it out from there. And there's not really a lot of mechanisms that even the Attorney General has, but especially a body like the New Jersey Election Law Enforcement Commission, which handles campaign finance. I mean, they're not that big of an agency. They're getting swamped with all kinds of just sort of procedural stuff at this time of year. They can't be dealing with stuff in real time. They can't be actively preventing misdeeds. And so I don't know how you solve it. I don't know if you really can. I mean, even on the federal level with the much bigger FEC, that's still a problem. But it's a really unfortunate incentive structure that we've got with politics.
It is. And the Election Law Enforcement Commission, they're there to enforce election, campaign finance law. Yeah. They're not law enforcement. And they don't have an ability to interview witnesses and bring people in and issue subpoenas and look at bank records and all sorts of things. I mean, this is going to be an interesting question for the Republicans. Now that this election is over, it's going to be up to the Republicans to continue this challenge that they made in court that got this dark money. And I know there's differences of how you define dark money. So let me say how I define dark money. It's dark money when I don't know who's funding them. And when I know who's funding them, then they're not dark money anymore. But I don't know who it is, and the votes are already in. And this idea of transparency is supposed to give voters that knowledge, and they didn't have the opportunity to do that, and that's a problem. So the issue that Republicans are going to have here is, do they want to see this through? Do they want to say that this is a matter of principle, that we have to follow it through so that it doesn't happen again? And that's not free. They've got a great lawyer in Jason Senna, but Jason's not a volunteer. And they're going to have to make a decision of, do they want him to? He now has the ability to issue subpoenas as the lawyer in this case, so he can subpoena bank records from the bank that that had the Jersey Freedom account. He can subpoena the media buyer and ask questions about who came to her and who she dealt with and how she got the money. And they can do all sorts of things. But the question is, at the end of the day, Republicans are going to have to make a financial decision. Do they want to know how Giuseppe Costanzo got in the race and who funded this dark money group, more than they want to hold that money to spend on a candidate running for local or county or office in 2024? And this is a judgment call on their part. And, we're not going to, unless somebody wants to start some GoFundMe site and get this challenge privately funded, it's the ball is in the Republicans' court as to whether they want to stand up for principle or not. And I won't be able to criticize them if they don't, because they have limited resources and they need to save it to win elections.
I think that's all right. Yeah. It's a tough call.
And if we don't hit other districts soon, there's going to, this idea.
Right.
Yeah, I'm going to start to get texts to people telling me to speed it up. So.
Yeah.
I will say really quick, as someone who tabulates elections in across the country, other states have had stories like this too. So I've seen stories like this. The most recent I remember was in Montana, when the Republicans really.
Montana's constant. That's like a thing that both parties, Green and Libertarians, all the time.
I'm just so used to this. But I guess, not to be too rhetorical, but do you think, David, do you maybe, or to anyone, do you think possibly changing the law and make it a little bit harder for third-party ballot access would be a good solution, or not really?
Well, look, I've believed for a long time, and I'm probably in the minority, and anybody I ever talk to about this is, sure, whatever, but it's not a priority. I think New Jersey ballot access is way too easy.
Yes.
And you only needed 50 signatures this year because it was a new map to run for the legislature. And, and I have this conversation with independents all the time, and I've had them over the years, which is you're not, just because you can stand outside the ShopRite and get 50 people to sign your petition doesn't mean you're a candidate. It just means that you're just a name on the ballot. But people vote for these candidates who, they come in, they've got a misleading slogan. Giuseppe Costanzo's running mate, Maureen Dukes Penrose. I mean, she is a registered Democrat who ran as the conservative candidate. So had it, these are the things that I want to know. Had it, I spoke to her. I don't get the impression she's ever met Giuseppe Costanzo. So, who's the matchmaker here? Who put those two together? I could tell you, I'll tell you what I do know. And this is indisputable, is that the circulator of the petition that got most of those signatures, is the daughter of the former Washington Township Democratic municipal chairman. His name is Frank Cianci. He doesn't call me back either. He should expect to be the New Jersey Globe Father of the Year, because I got to tell you, I'm a father. Mike is a father. Neither one of us would ever, under any circumstances at all, use our child as a human shield. And Frank Cianci, that's what he's done. Is he's had his daughter, who has two small children, and she's working in the math and science department at a local school as a clerical worker. And I call this woman constantly, and I feel horrible about it. I really do, because she's on the verge of tears. And I've called Frank Cianci. I've called her father, and I've left these voicemails for him saying, "What are you doing, man? Why are you making me call your daughter? Why are you, who does that? And, just call me back, and I won't call your daughter ever again." I haven't heard from him. I don't know what kind of man, hides behind his child. And it makes me suspicious. So I think there's something going on here. I really do. And I know that Senator Palestina in Atlantic County, I know that Chris Belbarella, they have written to law enforcement. They've written to the Attorney General. Del Barello wrote to the U.S. Attorney. As far as I know, they have not received a response, not a phone call, not anything. So we don't know, but I don't, at some point this may come out, at some point it won't, but this is and by the way, phantom candidates, this isn't new. This isn't anything that is this phenomenon of the 21st century. James Michael Curley in Boston and the Tammany Hall machine, they did this all the time. I mean, I remember, I shouldn't say I remember because I'm not that old, but I read about, Boston in the Curley days. If they had a guy, if their opponent was a guy named O'Malley, suddenly 5 other guys named O'Malley would file, and they'd all be there, and they would confuse the situation. Phantom candidates is part of the American political fabric. The question is whether law enforcement is willing to allow that to happen. The question is whether serious people, good government people, want to continue to let it happen. Because, here we are and we're saying, Giuseppe, you got 1,667 votes. I don't even know if he knew it was election day or not. And I would call him every day, as politely as I can. And I read him Ryan Dubicki's numbers. I walked him through on a voicemail every day how many votes have been cast and where they're coming from and everything. Sort of like, start your campaign already, guy, if you're a candidate. But the reality is, I agree with Joey. He wasn't a spoiler in this election. But one day, we're going to be sitting here and we're going to be saying this phantom candidate who received money from a dark money group, and we don't know who funded them, and they've used every loophole available, cost somebody an election. And it's going to happen. It's going to happen someday. And then we're going to, you could be sure that I'm going to say, I talked about this in 2023 and nobody did anything.
I mean, you saw in 2021, there was, you probably would have seen, not probably, I can't say this with any certainty, but I think there's a decent chance that in 2021, 11th District Assemblywoman Joanne Downey would have been able to win re-election had it not been for the presence of a Green Party candidate on that ballot. And I'm not saying that was the same kind of situation. I think
that's not a phantom candidate.
Yeah, I think that was just bad luck where it happened to be a Green Party candidate who was running of her own volition and just sort of wrong district, wrong time for Democrats. But it is, I bring that up just to prove the point of it can happen where races are close enough that half of a percentage point going to a third party candidate can be really crucial. So I think I'm going to officially cut us off on this.
Thank you.
And there's lots of other races to talk about. I think that we should maybe stick in South Jersey just to pull a little bit of cleanup, because there are a few other races in South Jersey that I don't think we'll spend quite as much time on. But there were county races in Gloucester, Cumberland, and Atlantic counties that all had notable results. And then there was also the 2nd Legislative District, where Vince Palestina won re-election. I would argue that the 2nd Legislative District is the one district in the state that you can say was an unambiguously good result for the GOP. Not just they still won anyways, not just it was fine, but like he did well. Let me get up the actual totals right now. He is ahead, 53 to 44. Mm-hmm. That's better than Jack Ciattarelli's margin in the district. That's way better than Donald Trump's margin in the district. Donald Trump lost this district by something like 12 points. Atlantic County, this is the Atlantic County district. Atlantic County proves time and time again that it kind of marches to the beat of its own drum. Whatever the rest of the state is doing, who cares? Atlantic County is gonna do something else. And right now, Atlantic County voters like their Republican incumbents. Vince Palestina, Claire Swift, Don Guardian won by fairly narrow margins in 2021. And they just seem to be popular. I think it's going to be really tough to dislodge them. I mean, do you see any sort of, and I should add too, that Atlantic Democrats had 2 of their own countywide offices up this year, including an incumbent sheriff, and they lost both of those too. I mean, is there any sort of glimmer of good news from these results for Atlantic Democrats specifically?
I think the only hope for them is a different electorate in a different year.
Yeah.
The turnout was really, really low. In most of these districts that we're looking at, it's going to wind up being about 55,000 votes that we're looking at right now. In Atlantic, I'm looking at 44,000, 45,000 votes for the Senate.
And you have to imagine that most of the missing votes, so to speak, are coming from the heavily Democratic areas like Atlantic City and like Pleasantville.
Right. So nothing good this year, but maybe in comparison, other years will be more voters.
Compared to 65,000 in that district in 2021. So
there you go.
Yeah.
You can't say that Karen Fitzpatrick was a bad candidate.
Yeah, and Democrats put money behind this. This was a real race. This was a lean Republican race, but this was a real race. And you like looking at the other results around the state, you might have assumed that this one would be closer than it was. But just this one place, Republicans found that cracked the code that no other Republicans around the state really did.
So one of the things, that people are going to have to look at is Vince Palestina the model for a competitive district incumbent? Is, where he works with the other party, he crosses party, he builds relationships that enables him to bring things home to his district. He was a good incumbent there in terms of his 4 years. He never stopped working, and that might be a model that other people have, which is, sometimes if you've got a Democratic governor, you've got a Democratic legislature. Sometimes you have to, work on issues that are for, that might annoy your caucus, but please your electorate and please your constituency. The other, quick things, and I'll go through real quick on this. Number one, Sean Peck, Libertarian candidate, real guy, real ideology, not a major political party, but the candidate of a political party. And he was the beneficiary of a group, the same dark money group as in District 4. He never heard of them. He dropped out of the race. He endorsed Vince Palestina. Some of these votes may have been already cast. People may not really have known that he dropped out of the race. But Libertarians, if he wasn't on the ballot, he got 1,363 votes. He got 3% of the vote. And you can imagine that most of that share would have gone to Palestina. So if you were talking about a situation that Ryan was mentioning, which is should it be a little bit harder to get on the ballot so that people with an organization and funding were running there, then you're not talking now you're not talking about you're talking about a much bigger margin there, and I think that's possible. The other thing is Atlantic County. I mean, that they're now 8-1 Republican on the Board of Commissioners, and their new sheriff Tokyo O'Donoghue, Scheffler was there for a couple terms. Sheriffs aren't easy to beat. They're really not. You don't see many incumbent sheriffs in New Jersey go down to defeat, but you saw 2 in South Jersey, Atlantic and in Cumberland. And Cumberland, it's also a different kind of a model of an incumbent. Mike Testa has figured this out. He went from being a challenger against an incumbent 4 years ago, to being safe, and to being, granted, not a huge county, but he's a party boss. He's the county chairman. Sure. When Testa ran for the Senate 4 years ago, Democrats had control of county government. They held all 3 constitutional offices, and Cumberland was a Democratic county. Now it is an all Republican. It will be in January, a all Republican board of commissioners. They have a Republican surrogate. By the way, I'm not going to talk about this long, but I love the fact that there is a resurgence of undertakers in politics. I can't think of a better place for a funeral director to serve in public office than as a county surrogate.
Cumberland, we've had that before, believe it or not. Marvin Paget, long time. So this has a little bit of a tradition.
Mike, I never would have come up with that name. Never would have come up with that name. But so now they're occupying, those two slots. Celeste Riley ought to be really, really frightened the next time she's up because Testa has made this work. And then the last thing is in Gloucester, this whole wow, Gloucester is turning red, which I believed in. I really did. I saw it. Trump carried Gloucester in 2016 over Clinton. Chitterelli won it comfortably. They picked up 2 county commissioners and a sheriff, and then they haven't won since. And they're not getting blown away, but they've got divisiveness here. And now next year you've got the sheriff and the 2 Republican county commissioners up in a presidential year, and you could be this county that I thought was turning red could be
all Democratic. Right?
Yeah. So it's again, I do this all the time. I quote Tom Crone, the Camden County Democratic. I don't think I ever pass up an opportunity to say. He says this is why Republicans can't have nice things, because you finally get you finally get to bat, and you wind up having a fight with the umpire and getting thrown out of the game. So that's South Jersey right now. But Palestina and Testa are sort of models of what to do as Republicans, because they're proving an ability to be popular with their electorate. Don Purdy, the county chairman in Atlantic, he was involved in District 4. That didn't go his way, but you can't argue that, when you beat an incumbent sheriff and flip a county, an at-large county commissioner seat, and your guy, the state senator, is reelected by a healthy margin. I don't think there's I don't think there's anything bad about where he is there. And they did really well in these local races. So Atlantic is, I would say, probably today, the Atlantic County Republican organization is more has a greater hold on the county than they have in a number of years.
I want to bring up one difference for the Republicans in this district, and that's Don Guardian, the only gay member of the legislature, right? So I want to ask you.
That seemed to no longer be true, but for now, yeah.
Right, there you go. Okay, so the point I'm getting at is who is running. And what I want to ask you about is, was their race, and I apologize that I didn't follow this as granularly as you probably did, Joey, but was their race devoid of some of those culture war issues that he may not have been comfortable with? And if so, wow, that's the only race where it was the case, and they did very well.
I mean, I think Republicans definitely hit Democrats on the migrant resettlement plan.
Yeah,
at the Atlantic City International
Airport. I'm specifically talking about the parental stuff.
Yeah, so that feels like a sort of culture war issue. But in general, I mean, no, it wasn't quite. You're not going to get the kind of rhetoric out of a Vince Palestina that you're going to get out of an Ed Durr. And obviously, you're not going to have Palestina, Swift, Guardian going super hard on like anti-LGBT stuff, because that would be wildly self-defeating. So,
and that's my point, is that that was a more successful model than the districts that did.
Yeah, and that I'll have. I mean, so has everybody said what they wanted to say about these South Jersey races?
Yeah.
So I think that we should move on to 11, which, in addition to 4, I think everybody kind of thought was going to be the big race. And then Vin Gopal pulled off an electoral performance that I still can't really wrap my head around, where he beat Steve. This was a district that had voted for Jack Ciattarelli, that he won by 4 percentage points in 2021, that everyone was like, boy, Vin Gopal is probably a little favored, but this is definitely a competitive race. He was running hard. Democrats were nervous, and he won by 21 percentage points, which is just nuts. I mean, that's outperforming Joe Biden by like almost 10 points. Almost no other Democrat was able to accomplish. I guess John Berzelli accomplished that too. Those are the two that were able to do something crazy like that. I mean, and you just look at the individual numbers. Hold on, I've got so many tabs open on my computer. The individual numbers in that district. I mean, Gopal, there are 19 towns in the district, and Gopal carried 17 of them.
Yeah.
He lost Freehold Township by a couple hundred votes, and he lost Colts Neck by 1,000,000 percentage points because Colts Neck just votes Republican no matter what. But I mean, he did crazy well in some of these towns. There was the one that really caught my eye is tiny Deal. Deal has, I think, I don't know, like 500 residents or something like that. This is a town that usually votes deep Republican. This voted for Jack Ciattarelli by 60 percentage points, and it voted for Vin Gopal by 20 percentage points.
Wow.
I don't know how he did that.
Oh, there actually is an answer there. There's an
Okay,
answer.
what's the answer?
Yeah, there is.
Right,
Yes.
So Deal is dominated by a Syrian Jewish community,
Right.
that Vin Gopal has been courting for years, and has built relationships within this one community that enables him to that has enabled him to win a town of voters that he's the Democrat they like.
Yeah. And I mean, you get like that was the most extreme example, but you kind of got that sense that he was just doing that in every town in its own way.
He was.
He knows each of these towns. He knows all of the people in each of those towns, and he has found a way to radically appeal to all of them, and to an extent that I did not think was possible.
So here's what happened. 2 years ago, he knew he was getting, we talked about this on the last week. He knew he was getting the scare of the lifetime, right? Yeah. He worked all those 17 towns you talked about. He had, an individual effort to do individual things for each of those towns. Mm-hmm. And he performed, and he got them done in the legislature, whether it was budget or whether it was legislation. He delivered for 17 towns. Then he communicated to those 17 towns, here's what I've done for you. This is why I merit re-election. And it was like 17 different campaigns. It was local campaigns in each town. Like he was running for council in each town. And it worked. I mean,
with millions of dollars to get that message out.
I mean,
and he started very early, mailing in August, letting them know, this is what I've done for you. And that's why you saw 17 towns. That's why you saw the incredible turnout that he saw in Ocean. I mean, he was winning precincts that Jennifer Beck and Lori Annetta won by 60%. He was winning by 60%.
Jennifer Beck, that's a throwback.
Yeah, but and what you saw here, again, candidate, and you hate to kick a guy when he's down, but he's down 20 points. So you kick a guy
under 40%.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't get a first tier recruit. Now maybe it's that maybe it's that the very best candidates, which would have been County Commissioner Mike Arnone or County Clerk Christine Hanlon, or some of the mayors down there. Maybe they saw this. Maybe they said, "Gee, Gopal is a better candidate than we're used to," and they didn't want to go up against him. But the bottom line is they picked this guy, Steve Denistrian, who's never been involved in politics before. And they said, "Hey, would you like to run for the Senate?" And he said, "Well, yeah, that sounds fun. I wouldn't mind being a senator. What's a senator?" And, and again, and I apologize to the guy for saying it, but this is something, and I think Mike is going to back me up, maybe not, but one of the things that I have noticed over 50 years watching New Jersey politics is PR guys in politics don't do well. These corporate PR guys, they come in and they think this is easy. Yeah. They think that they can do this because they've been, they communicate with people for a living, and it ain't the same. And PR guys are sometimes a horrible fit for running campaigns. And Mike, I'm sure you can, you've been in these meetings where some local candidate, they bring this guy in, and no, you never saw him before, but he's public relations man,
and he can present well. He can speak. He can lay, he can lay it out. I saw him. I was in the studio on News 12 with him over the summer when he talked to Alex, Power and Politics, and he presented very well. But he didn't really say very much. He told Brenna Flanagan he wouldn't answer her on what his position was on abortion. He'd rather listen to what his constituents' positions were. He wouldn't answer on his position on Donald Trump. He didn't want to say anything. He didn't want to be pinned down on anything. And people just didn't see very much from him that persuaded much of anybody to go for him, other than outside of Colts-Neck, which Colts-Neck is just looking for a reason to go Republican.
So you have this guy who doesn't really know how to do this against somebody who does. Gopal was, and to me this is a compliment. He was a teenage political junkie. He was a politics nerd, just like all of us, at that age. Some of us teenagers more recently than others, but
Who says I ever left being a teenager? Who knows how old I am?
Yeah, but Dubicki's not even the youngest guy in a room on this one. But Gopal's been living this. He's been watching this. He was a young county chairman. He worked on campaigns. He had this little brief career in journalism, did not go well for him. I'm glad he recognized that running a political website should be left to to those who know how to do it. But
people are trained in the fine arts of journalism.
But as a candidate, number one, he knows what to do. Number two, and I think this was a hugely important component, he knew what to do, but not to the extent of, don't tell me what to do. I know this district better than everybody else. This is a guy who listened to advice. And when people called him and said, Vin, you got to do this, or you've got to shift this strategy, you've got to spend money there, instead of arguing with him and saying, no, I know what I'm doing, he did it. He listened, and he listened to other people. He didn't, he wasn't a candidate who entirely ran his own campaign. And that was hugely important. This is a guy, and he frustrated some people along the way, in his own party, but he knew his district, and he said, I'm gonna vote my district, whether people like it or not. I'm gonna, this is how I feel. And we talked last week about maybe there were people who thought Gopal wasn't democratic enough, but he was a great candidate, and he had people. I don't know if this is going to be cheesy or not. I tried it out yesterday, but he had gope tails, because
that confused me because of the GOP. The GOP and go.
Yeah, well, you have to read slower, Mike, and then you'll get it. But you can't deny that not only did he win by this huge number, but two incumbent assemblywomen who didn't exactly vote at a step with the 11th district got slaughtered.
Yeah.
And that, that's on Gopal, that he found. By the way, you want to talk about candidate recruitment and doing a candidate recruitment right. He gets a councilwoman out of Ocean Township who ran in nonpartisan elections as the Democrat on a ticket with mostly Republicans.
Right.
And he gets her to run for one of the assembly seats. And by the way, she's a physician, and is able to talk about, women's health care and all sorts of things. And then they get Luann Peter Paul, great candidate, activist for a lot of years, had never run for office, former prosecutor, former municipal court judge in Asbury Park and in Long Branch. So you want to talk about great recruitments, and again, I'm not showing, this isn't a bias of saying they were the best candidates in the race, but they were high quality challengers and who brought something to the table, and they could raise some of their own money. Gopal, Nobody saw this. I didn't see it. He didn't see it. Republicans didn't see it. The state Republicans didn't see it. The state Democrats didn't see it. This was this was the Joe Kennedy thing too. Remember when Joe Kennedy said, I want my son Jack to win, but I'm not paying for a landslide.
Right.
And that's what wound up happening here is they were so careful in this district that this turned out to be a blowout.
Yeah.
And you jump ahead to 2027. Who's going to run against Gopal again when they see what his talents are?
They didn't want to run this time. Yeah.
So
I think that the place where you're gonna, I do kind of wonder in 2025, and this goes, we mentioned this a little bit, but this goes for districts 3 and 4 as well. You sort of saw these campaigns that were dominated by the top of the ticket by Paul Moriarty and Vin Gopal and John Bersacelli. You do have to kind of wonder how these the 6 brand new estates, how they will do when they are left to their own devices and they're sort of more at the whims of the gubernatorial election that's happening at the top of the ticket. But instead, you look at these 11th district results. I mean, I realized that Gopal was a big part of the Democrats' victory for the assembly, but Donlin and Peter Paul got a combined more than 56% of the vote against 2 incumbents. The incumbents got less than 44%.
Yep.
I mean, that's a tough majority to overcome, even with the different dynamics of a 2025 race. I mean, that'll be rough for Republicans. You kind of have to wonder whether they're going to even really try all that much or whether they're going to refocus.
You're going to see a lot of, we used to laugh when Van Drew did this, but you're going to see a lot of Moriarty team, even though he's not on the ballot, or
especially
the Gopal
team.
Right?
This is definitely Team Gopal now.
Right.
These were his people, and they were going to run as his people. Ryan, what do you got on?
I mean, we're seeing with the other districts, like LDs 3 and 4. This is another district where overall turnout is lower than 2021, but mail voting turnout is higher than 2021. In 2021, there were 73,000 ballots cast. Now we're at 56,000, so 76%. Mail voting turnout, though, overall, not partisan though, it's at 103%. We're at 12,828 now versus 12,492 in 2021. So, and the election's not even certified yet. So, I think the trend is, at least in these competitive districts, higher mail voting turnout compared to 2 years ago, and lower overall turnout, spells more Democratic victories. I would think.
Brian, one thing I noticed is that Republicans in Monmouth had been a lot more interested in early in-person voting in past years, and they kind of gave up on it this time. Team Gopal had a significant lead in the in-person early vote, or Democrats, I should say, had a significant lead in the in-person early vote this time, unlike the last 2 years.
Yeah, I'm looking now. So in LD 11 specifically, in 2021, there were 9,700 early votes cast, compared to this year of only 6,500. So it's a small number, only 10.
Sure.
Early voting still new, obviously. But higher mail voting turnout, lower early voting turnout, and lower overall turnout. It's a good recipe for Democrats. The margins though for the early vote, again, early vote's so small in New Jersey, but the margin is the same though. The Democrats.
Okay.
The margin, specifically the margins. Both were at let's calculate now, 41% Democrats, and let's see over that. 34% Republican. Those are both years.
Oh wow! Oh, interesting.
Unaffiliated voters made up a significant amount of the early vote. LD 11 specifically in both.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. Yeah. I have a question for everybody. This PAC mailing about tying Spadia to Vin Gopal. Do you think that actually helped him? Do you think with Republicans? It was a dark money. I mean, we all saw it. You wrote about it.
But it wasn't really. It's not really dark money because this was
right.
This was sort of the Hugan PAC, and everybody knew where it was from. It was sort of this was sort of the official Republican independent expenditure group.
Did it help him though? Tying him to Spadia?
At the end of the day, I think it was a waste of money. It was a monumental waste of money because Spadia at this point, what's he trying to, what were they trying to do? Scare Democrats away from Gopal because Bill Spadia said something nice about him? That's
that's exactly what they were trying to do. I mean, I think that's part of the, like, I'll bet it was pretty targeted to Democrats.
And Joey, I don't necessarily know that that's what they were trying to do. I think they were trying to, the same people and great strategists. Maybe this was a little, maybe this was more clever than we give credit for, which is this was Jack Ciattarelli's team running this independent expenditure. And they took some of this money and they tried to build up some of Spadia's negatives here. And maybe this was a little bit of a long game, but the bottom line is, as it related to getting Steve Dinistrian votes, that if that was the goal, then it was a dumb idea. If the money was there to try and mess with Spadia a little bit, I don't know. I mean, I think this went.
That's a better bet. That is a better bet, knowing who they are. Yeah.
This went to Democrats, right? So this is, this is just, it's just a little bit weird. And one other thing, and I'm looking, I'm looking at some old numbers just because we're talking about District 11. I was already working in politics when this young 32-year-old councilman from Long Branch named Frank Pallone ran against Brian Kennedy for the state Senate. And we didn't think he had any chance at all. And he beats him in 83. And then 87, which is the same circumstance, a long time ago, but the same circumstance of this was the 6th year of Tom Kaine's governorship. Pallone is now, the incumbent. They put up a woman named Jerry Popkin, who was had not run for office before, but she was part of that county organization. And Pallone got 60% of the votes, 60.08. And that sort of set Pallone on a course to win a congressional seat when Jim Howard died the next year. Congressman Pallone, I apologize because he's not going to like this, but what you're seeing in the 11th district in 2023 is Vin Gopal is outperforming where Frank Pallone was. And Pallone's had an extraordinarily successful career, but Gopal's doing better at the same age. Gopal is doing better. And this is, and by the way, the district then, it was, it wasn't, it was still the Long Branch, Ocean Township. It had Wall, but it was, that district was a little more, maybe a little bit more Republican. But we're talking about 36 years ago, so we're not, it's not a fair comparison, other than the fact that Gopal is topping Frank Pallone.
Well, it's impressive now. We often think of this kind of bipartisanship as not really possible in this age of polarization to appeal to the other side to this extent, and so it really is a testament to him that he's able to do it. It is a throwback in many ways, and that he's able to do it now is that much more impressive.
Yeah. And by the way, I do have to mention this. It's really small, but Frank, this is another guy. You talk about model, who to model after. Frank Pallone is a guy who got into a car when he ran for council in Long Branch in 1982, put his foot on the gas, and that foot has not come up. This is a guy who runs scared every single time he runs. This is a guy so attuned to local politics that he is both the congressman from this district and the ranking Democratic member on the House Energy and Commerce Committee, one of the most powerful committees in the House of Representatives. But he is also the Democratic municipal chairman of Long Branch, because all politics is local, and is people joke with him. I know that he's also the chief of staff to the mayor of Long Branch, which is his brother. Because Frank Pallone can be in this high level meeting with on serious global issues, and his brother will call and say, well, we got this public works truck and it's stuck. And, what do we do? And Pallone will, say, well, here's what you're doing, and his brother's learning. I mean, he's I shouldn't say it like that. I shouldn't dismiss him as the younger brother. John Pallone is a very capable mayor. And I don't want to, it's not my intent to disparage him, other than to say that this is Pallone's secret sauce is don't ever take the foot off the gas and be involved in local issues in your town. And this is exactly what Gopal did. And this is how Democrats get 60% of the vote in a Republican, in what should be a Republican district, is by you don't think this should be a Republican district? I think it's I think if not for Vin Gopal, I think
it's a blue tilting competitive district that Gopal has just sort of made into his own.
This is how a Democrat wins an incredible landslide in a blue tilting district is to do it just the way he did it.
Yeah. I think that it is time to move on to the assembly result that I personally find the most fascinating. It's a district that technically borders the 11th. I've got a graphic right here. If you read my story earlier today, you've already seen these maps. But here is the 30th legislative district. This is a district that almost always goes extraordinarily Republican in every race that comes before it. It voted for Jack Ciattarelli by, 30 points, something like that. I forgot the exact number. Voted for Donald Trump by even more. It's just, it's Republican in everything that it does. Did I say it's really Democrat before? I think I might have misspoken. It's extremely Republican in everything that comes before it. And this year, Lakewood Orthodox Jewish leaders said, actually, we really want to elect a Democrat. We want to put a Democrat into the state assembly and have him advocate for our interests there. We don't think, we like our Republican legislators, but we don't think that we have this sway that we want to because they are stuck in the minority, because they fundamentally don't get the same seat at a table that the Democrats would. And so they did it. They set out to do this and they did it. And I mean, you can see this map here. They got the craziest level of results out of Lakewood that I've pretty much ever seen. They got Avi Schnall. He's a rabbi. He's the former state director of Agudath Israel of America. They got him to win Lakewood by 73 percentage points over, they targeted one assemblyman specifically, Ned Thompson. The other two Republicans they left alone, but they said, Ned Thompson, you're going down. And got a crazy margin. And then you look at the turnout, and most of the district fell pretty precipitously in turnout from 2021, which is very common. That's what most of the state did. We've already talked about it in a couple of other districts. You lose tens of thousands of votes versus a more high turnout year. In Lakewood, they gained votes. There were thousands of voters who voted this year who did not vote in 2021. They came out specifically to support the Orthodox leadership team's preferred legislative candidates, and they elected a Democrat by, this is a two-way margin. So technically the margin here is 31% to 20% within like a larger race, but the two-way margin here is 61% to 39%, which is crazy. I don't know. I mean, that's sort of the overview here. Were you guys expecting this?
Oh, I thought it was very possible. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I expected it, but if you know how to crank out your community, if you know how to activate your community, then things like this can happen. I mean, nobody has, if there's a community where that can happen, right? It's a tightly woven community like this one.
Yeah.
There were just some numbers that jumped out at me. They're so crazy, right? Like Sean Kane got 21,000 votes in Ocean County in Lakewood, right? His running mate Thompson got 3,400. So 7 times as much as running mate. So then Avi Schnall got 27,000 votes, and his nominal running mate, right? We probably never met, Sal Francino, gets 2,000 votes. So yeah. What's that? 13 times the number of votes. And these are running mates of each other.
I mean, It just means that there were like the vast majority of voters in Lakewood went out to the polls and specifically bubbled in 2 Republicans, Bob Singer for Senate and Sean Keane for Assembly, and 1 Democrat, Avi Schnall. Yep. I mean, this is an era where you don't see that very much. Most districts will only have a couple percentage points worth of difference, if that, between the candidates. And here, almost every single voter in Lakewood did this very specific thing that the Orthodox leadership had decided that this was their ticket, and the voters agreed.
And not accidental. I mean, the anecdotally, I heard about lines on Sunday at early voting, and the voters were holding their VOD cards. For those who don't know, the VOD is the the umbrella group to all of the multiple Orthodox Jewish organizations in Lakewood, and that card said Bob Singer, Sean Keane, Avi Schnall, and Frank Sadeghi, and for county commissioner, and Jeff Moran for Ocean County surrogate. And these were the instructions. This was the slate that was blessed by the community leadership, and these numbers are all the same. And I went and I spent some time yesterday going through old results, and I could not find an example of any other time, anywhere, any place, under any circumstances, where 18,000 votes separated two running mates.
Right.
It never happens. This is the asterisk of all asterisks.
Yeah.
This is an incredible anomaly. And what's did I think Avi Schnall was going to win? Joey and I talked about it. Micah, you and I talked about it. I've talked about it with a lot of people. There were people telling me, even when I was tweeting vote, early vote numbers on Sunday, I'm getting calls from people that I trust saying, stop it. You're making yourself look ridiculous. This isn't going to happen. This district is too Republican. Not going there. Mathematically impossible for this to happen. So not only did Schnall win, but I thought, I became smarter because I read Joey Fox's stories about this going back to February, and then when Rabbi Schnall got back in August, and Joey has the benefit of coming from New York, where he's seen this happen, and people should go back and read his original story because it laid out a Democratic state senator from New York City who won in a heavily Trump district, but never in a million years did I think that Avi Schnall was going to win this district by 10,000 votes. I mean, it's ridiculous. And I don't say it ridiculous in a disbelieving way, but these are ridiculous numbers. This is, and now I look at it and I'm thinking, how did I wonder? How was this? And Joey, this is more on me than on you, a little bit on you, but we had this as what, a toss up?
Yeah.
And we got a toss up. We were off by 10,000 votes.
I will fully defend the toss-up rating. I said in the voters' guide.
I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying.
Specifically, I think it's worth noting. I said in the voters' guide that the toss-up rating was less of a specific race rating, and more of literally tossing up our hands and saying,
I don't know. You're right.
No, this is so unprecedented. There's literally no historical precedent for it. So we just
and I'm not trying to say that I in any way predicted. All I'm saying is we all talked about this the minute the map came out. You knew that when a district was going to be dominated by Lakewood the way that this district was going to be, you knew that this was possible. You knew that, if one community decides to swamp that district, that, in turnout, and everybody else sits on their hands with the kind of turnout we've seen, that something like this was possible. Certainly possible.
And what you're seeing here is the, I don't know, this is the first word that came to my mind, and people are going to think that I'm trying to be clever. I really wasn't. The genesis of this candidacy was what Joey said, that they wanted to have somebody in the room in the majority, because they've got Bob Singer on the Senate. He's in the Senate. He is not an Orthodox Jew, but he is Jewish and extraordinarily close to Lakewood and has been for decades. So they have him on the Republican side, but they didn't have anybody in the majority. And ultimately, Avi Schnall decided not to do it. And then circumstances changed because there was some generosity in the budget from Governor Murphy and the Democratic leadership in the legislature for Lakewood. And Bob Singer knew all politics is local. I got to vote for this budget. This is, one of the reasons that we're going to get the money is because, this is Singer saying one of the reasons we're going to get the money is because I pushed for it. So he can't claim credit for the money and the services and everything that went to Lakewood and having voted against it. And Singer, as I'm told, went to Sean Keane and Ned Thompson and said, you got to vote for the budget. And Assemblyman Keane said, yeah, I get it. Okay, I'm going to vote for the budget. And, maybe that might make me vulnerable in a primary someday, but, Lakewood's an important part of my district. I'm going to vote for the budget. And Ned Thompson says, no, I won't do it. I'm the minority conference leader, and I'm a member of leadership, and I will not vote for Phil Murphy's budget. So that's what triggered, a reevaluation of their needs in that district. That helped Rabbi Schnall come in and say, I'm gonna run again. I'm gonna get in, and Marta Harrison, former Lakewood mayor, good Democratic soldier. She came, she got out of the race and made room for him. And now Ned Thompson, he didn't vote for the budget, and he's not in leadership anymore.
And it's his last budget.
And
he'll never vote for a budget again.
No, but I got to tell you, Sean Keane is never going to vote against the budget again,
right,
as long as there's money for Lakewood here. And so from budget, when you start to look at these majorities in for budget purposes, it's an extra Republican vote in the Senate and it's an extra Republican vote in the Assembly before you even go. And this is an incredible realignment of local politics. And
there's no other town in New Jersey that can say that they have a seat in 3 of the 4 caucuses, legislative caucuses.
Yeah. No, and they're looking at this, and at some point Lakewood may say, well, why don't we take the other assembly seat? If we want it, we'll just take it. There's really not much that Howell and Wall can do about it. I am now at a point, and Joey and I had this conversation today, and we'll see, Ryan is the data guy. I'll see if he's comfortable, whether he agrees with me or not. But I went from, a couple days ago, not sure if Avi Schnall is winning, to thinking he's a safe incumbent in this district.
Yeah.
Going forward, I don't think they could beat him.
And I kind of think that, Bob Singer is 76 years old. You kind of got to wonder if this is maybe his last term. It's been speculated that things might be his last term for like a decade now. Mm-hmm. And he keeps on pushing through. But, at one point he might say, okay, I'm going to hang up my hat. And can Republicans stop Schnall from just sort of steamrolling into that Senate seat?
Yeah.
Given this result, I don't know. But Ryan, so I do want to ask you about, I know we moved on from the turnout a little bit, but when you look at the numbers, do they kind of stand out as unusual here?
Well, they stand out in terms of the other districts too, because it's another district where advanced turnout exceeds 2021, but overall turnout does not. We're right now, and the election's uncertified, so I try not to get too technical, but right now we're at 82% of 2021. We're at 45,625 votes. In LD30 in 2021 is 55,864. So hence 82%. And then advanced votes this year, we're at 16,159 compared to 13,834 in 2021. So I guess we're seeing a trend where if advanced voting exceeds 2021, but not overall turnout, it's spelling more Democratic victories.
And I think that's also in this particular case, I imagine a lot of that extra advanced vote is like long lines early voting in Lakewood.
Yeah, David was tweeting. He was reporting that on Sunday. About how they had bring an extra voting machine, and that's when I knew I was like, oh, this race probably is going to be really. I didn't think the margin would be this big, but I was like, okay, he definitely has a chance. Even when early voting is still not significant in New Jersey yet, when they have to bring a second voting machine, something's gonna. You just get that feeling that's on Tuesday.
And by the way, I asked this question, and I over the phone, I could hear just sort of the smile through the silence. I asked, was this a strategy? Don't vote early the first weekend. Don't come out on that first Sunday. Don't don't have, this huge number, these lines in Lakewood on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday nights. Hold it all for the end because it is, at that point, Ned Thompson was feeling okay.
There's nothing that could be done.
By Sunday, when Assemblyman Thompson is hearing from people, there's lines in Lakewood. There's nothing he can do. It is too late to say, let me turn out Howell and Wall. And you sort of wonder all the emphasis that Monmouth County Republicans put trying to beat Vin Gopal. They didn't have a turnout operation for Howell and Wall, and they didn't have a vote. They didn't pump out vote. These are suburban, probably more informed voters, but they didn't. These are Republicans in these towns, and they didn't have a strategy. They didn't have a way of maximizing it. Maybe they didn't believe it was going to happen. Maybe they thought it was mathematically impossible. But this was this was everything. And I'll say something else. And you're gonna people are gonna hear, I think, more about this from a lot of people fairly soon. And that is Ned Thompson's campaign that and I you don't usually hear me coming down on a side like this, but I think some of his tactics were dog whistles, and as a Jewish person, I found what he was saying offensive, and I've had a good relationship with Ned Thompson, and I think he's I absolutely positively don't think that he's anti-Semitic, and he's had a good relationship with the Lakewood Orthodox Jewish community over the years that he's representing them too. But put back to the wall, he ran a campaign with some unfortunate messaging about Lakewood Rabbi Avi Schnall into Howell and Wall. Don't let the rabbi from Lakewood, in the door. Don't let the rabbi from Lakewood run, take over our towns. And I was sort of hoping that some Republican would rise to the occasion and say, wait a minute, that's not right. That's not how we're looking at running campaigns in Monmouth County and in New Jersey. And at some point, I think Assemblyman Thompson's going to come back to Trenton for a lame duck session, and he's going to be the conference leader of the Assembly Republican Caucus, for some important legislation, and I'm hoping that some of his colleagues question him on that and say, what did you do? And if he made a mistake and he apologized, that's one of my, a guy that I respect, that I was talking to in Lakewood earlier today, was saying, that's a tenet of the Jewish religion is repentance and forgiveness. So Ned Thompson needs to ask for that. Otherwise, I think this is going to be a really unfortunate taint on his legacy and his career.
And it didn't, like so many of these clever tricks that we talk about, it didn't even really amount to much. Schnall did come in last of the four candidates in the Monmouth portion of the district, but it wasn't by a whole lot. 380 votes away from his running mate. So, a few people got that message and decided to vote on the basis of it, but it didn't. What good does it do? It's not worth, the offense that you've made to the community and the tarnish that you put on yourself for 380 more votes.
I mean, so Thompson actually did outperform Phil Murphy by like a pretty significant margin in Howell and Wall. He did, I think, like 14 points better. Thompson did like 14 points better than Murphy did in Howell. So there is some indication, and not just with the running mate disparity, there is some indication that these towns might have reacted kind of negatively to the Democratic slate as a whole. It wasn't nearly enough.
Yeah. And look, it wouldn't have surprised me if if there were some Democrats in Wall and Howell, that say, this is, there's NIMBY is real. And it wouldn't surprise me if there were some liberal and moderate Democrats who said, Lakewood is expanding. I mean, they have 5,000 children a year born in Lakewood. And there is an electoral gestation period of 18 years and 9 months, but there are new people moving into town too, and this town is getting bigger. The population is exploding, and there's going to be a point where where there is a look at expansion into Howell. There's already an expansion into Tom's River, and that was an issue in the the mayor's race, both in the primary and in the general. It was a little less of a dog whistle. Some people say it wasn't a dog whistle at all. They didn't say the Lakewood people, the rabbi, but they said the Lakewood developers, and that's got that same connotation here. And look, whether I like it or not, it's really not that. It's not at all important. It's the fact that this is now a political reality in central New Jersey, and it's going to be a question of whether not if this base is going to expand, and become more political now that they see they can, but when it is.
I would just say really quick, this is also a district where, where voters really didn't vote for their party, because at least in terms of the advance vote, because I have all this data in front of me, in 2021, Democrats and Republicans split the advance vote 30%. This year, it was 25% Dem, 46% Republican, and Schnall still won.
There's a lot of registered Republicans in Lakewood who
So
party races just didn't matter.
Like you're saying, it's like a huge asterisk, David, in terms of trends, partisan trends.
I mean, this is now the one place in the state where Brian Stack is going to look at these numbers, and he's going to want to go down to Lakewood and find out how they did it.
Yeah.
And by the way, the people of Lakewood, just call him anytime, 201-376. I'm not going to give the number out here, but this is sort of Stack-esque. There's not many places where you can say to the electorate, let's vote this way, and people follow, people trust them. You can do it in Union City. You could do it, not even as much in North Bergen as it used to be, especially now that Brian Stack is the senator from North Bergen. But apparently now you can do it in Lakewood.
Yeah, and
that makes them a force. So not just the fact that they elected an assemblyman, but now they've seen now they've seen the path to voter turnout. And by the way, I should point out, this is not an anomaly in Lakewood. They have been electing Democrats and Republicans to the township committee for years. The mayor of Lakewood is a Democrat. The difference is, and they split their vote. They like to have a Democratic committee person and a Republican committee person. The new township committee woman elect is a Republican Latina from Lakewood who ran with the support of the VOD. They're used to doing that. The question now is, now that they've understood how to harness the power of voter turnout, now that they can say, we are the Brian Stacks of Ocean County, they've got, now they know how to do it. So what's going to happen in 2025 when there's a governor's race, and all of a sudden, instead of doing, their normal margins, now they know how to get votes out early. They know how to do vote by mail. They know how to really play this GOTV game. And that's going to make Lakewood even more influential in statewide races.
The one thing that I'll say to that, and I think this is maybe the last thing we should say about this district, just so we can talk about the last few districts on our list. But that I think that part of Schnall's victory, a huge part of Schnall's victory, comes from the VOD and from the Lakewood Orthodox leadership and from this general sense of this is our ticket, here's who you should support, and the voters just being primed in this particular area to do that. But it's also, Schnall is rooted in this community. He is Orthodox Jewish himself, obviously. Right. And he has long had, he's a pretty prominent person in this community.
Yeah. And very charismatic and likable.
Yeah, but more importantly, he's not like a liberal outsider like Phil Murphy or
so there's a big difference between endorsing Phil Murphy as they did.
Yeah, they did. The VOD did endorse Phil Murphy.
Means something entirely different. Yeah,
there were some lower level rabbis and Orthodox leaders who didn't, and then that ended up. It all kind of worked against Murphy in 2021. Yeah. The VOD endorsed him, and he lost the town. My point here being that I think that the Lakewood leadership, now that they've seen this, recognizes that they can have a big political sway. I don't think that they can just randomly pull out a 70-point victory for anyone who they please. This was rooted in the specific context of who Schnall is and how this race went.
Right. Yeah, they got to sway because of redistricting, not because of
Well, that's true too. It's particularly the legislative district. That's a very good point. Yeah.
So if you're Schnall, do you even campaign in Monmouth County in 2025? Yeah. Or you just really bank on Lakewood?
If you want to be Vin Gopal, you do.
Right.
Yeah. I think he would be smart to try to be the assemblyman for everywhere here.
Yeah.
He technically, I believe, I was doing the math in my head earlier, Yeah, so this is obviously unrealistic, but let's say that Ned Thompson had gotten literally every single vote out of Monmouth County this year, then Schnall would have lost. And that's not how voters work. You don't just get 100% of the vote in a contested race. But just sort of in general, the 6,000 people in Monmouth County who, if all who voted for Schnall were important, if they had all voted for Thompson instead, then that's a Thompson victory.
That's right.
So it's not nothing. It's getting even just 25% of the vote or whatever in Howell means something.
Yeah.
But okay, so I'm going to officially, because it's 10:06 p.m., I'm going to officially move us off of LD30. So there's a few different districts left worth talking about, and we could talk about them, I'm sure, for an hour and a half if we wanted to. But I think I'm going to break them down into two main groups, and we can sort of talk about each group as a distinct entity, because I think that they kind of are. And the first is districts 14, 16, and 38, all of which are just have a few common themes. They're sort of historical swing districts that everybody still thinks of as swing districts, but that have gotten fairly Democratic in recent years. They all back Joe Biden by big margins and Phil Murphy by smaller margins, but still backing Phil Murphy. They all had at least two Democratic incumbents running. There was an open seat for the assembly in both 14 and 16. And they were all districts. This is more true of 14 and 38 than it is of 16. So 14 and 38 in particular were districts where Republicans really wanted to make a statement in there and then struggled to get the recruits that they wanted and struggled to get the fundraising they wanted. So I'm painting with a broad brush here, but I think that the stories leading up to the races in these three districts, 14 is in the Trenton suburbs, 16 is around Princeton and Somerset County, 38 is Bergen County. The stories leading up to these three races were all similar-ish, and the results were all kind of similar. In each case, Democrats were a bit worried about at least one of the seats, and in each case, Democrats were basically fine. They won by thousands of votes. They were pretty much successful. Republican hopes of making some real dents just did not work out. Do you guys see there being any alternate version of these races where Republicans ran better campaigns, got better candidates, and were able to make something happen that they didn't? Or was this just kind of set in stone from the beginning and we didn't even realize it?
I think in terms of advanced voting, it was set in stone. I'm looking at the numbers now. Overall turnout and advanced turnout were both lower this year than compared to 2021. I would say the one thing, I guess, it's hardly that beneficial, but Republicans did do better with the advanced vote this year than in 2021 in LD14 specifically. So that's, I guess, one thing to pat on the back. But in terms of, no, it's basically everything. It's a resemblance of 2021, just lower turnout from what I'm seeing with LD14 specifically, because that's the first district you mentioned, Joey.
Yeah, I mean, this is this is a candidate recruitment thing, and
Yep.
and it starts at the local level. So the fact that Republicans have been wiped out in Hamilton, and that you don't have these prospects anymore. You can't, I don't see, first of all, I don't see how a Republican not from Hamilton Township, not, longtime Hamilton, wins. You can't, I said that incorrectly. I don't see how you can win this district for Republicans without somebody from Hamilton Township that's on that slate who has an ability to bring crossover votes. And so
Pat's not even from the district. She lives outside of the district. Yeah.
Well, she moved into the district because
okay.
But the reality, the reality here is they've wiped out the bench. So you don't have these credible candidates. You don't have Ileana Shermer. They don't have anybody to go to that's really well known there, and that and even people Hamilton adjacent. It's not like they got Dave Freed, the mayor of Robbinsville, to run there. So again, you're not going to win this district without superior candidates, and you're not going to win it without money. And they didn't have money, and I think maybe one of these missed opportunities is with this open seat, that maybe they should have gone, after one assembly seat, maybe just made that the focus. And look, the reality is you're not beating Linda Greenstein. This is another Energizer bunny when it comes to a legislature, legislator. This is another person who, always runs scared and goes to everything and does this full time. But they had an open seat, and Tennille McCoy was not Dan Benson, and this was a missed opportunity. But at the end of the day, even if they had the right candidate here, even if they had the money, even if they had the if they weren't winning they weren't winning in 11, they weren't winning in 14.
Yeah. And I mean, McCoy won by, was it 28.4% for her to 20.8% for her opponent. I mean, that's just, that would translate to like a 16-point margin in a one-on-one race. That's not something you can really make up. This district is just very blue. And I think that was a little bit of the story in 16 and 38 too, where regardless of the individual dynamics, these are just districts that on the whole like Democrats. And unless Democrats are really in overall deep trouble, it's probably just going to keep on electing them.
Well, this was the year with the Hamilton mayor's race. Jeff Martin was on the ballot. And so if 14 was a missed opportunity, it would have required a closer Hamilton race. It would have required Republicans to be doing better municipally, turnout wise, in order to impact the legislative race, which just didn't happen either. So it was, a confluence of events, I think.
And it's just a point to make, which is that when you look at some of these wins here, Vin Gopal, Jeff Martin, Mayor Hamilton, Andrew Zwicker, Joe Lagana. This is the future of the Democratic Party. Mm-hmm. This is, all four of these are potential candidates for higher office someday. And when you have people like that winning in talented people that have shown an ability to win an election, even in areas that should be a little bit more competitive than they were, you can't take away the fact that Jeff Martin, for example. I mean, this is he won a solid margin, and he beat an incumbent 4 years ago, and this is a former Air Force officer, and very smart and engaging, and has all the right skills, and with apologies to the future U.S. Senate candidate, the First Lady of Hamilton might be one of the most politically talented first ladies in the state. So you look at a guy like Jeff Martin, and you're thinking he's got like the whole package here. and he's not yet 40, and he's won 2 decisive wins in a town that at the local level could and should still be competitive.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. So if we're putting 38 in this part of the discussion, Democrats have some work to do too here, right? I mean, Republicans have to step it up, but Democrats haven't taken off the way they should. Those margins are still too close for them in a district.
Mike, I question you to those numbers. This is one place where you have a technical.
Oh, you're right. We've got 70% in. You're exactly right.
Yeah. So Joe Logano leads Micheline Attier 57-43 in what I believe are the correct numbers.
Yeah, no, I was looking more at those assembly races. Maybe I'm wrong, but are the assembly races?
Yeah, the assembly races. Swain has 28.2% and Tully has 27.8%.
Okay, I'm looking at bad numbers then. Okay.
Yeah,
Decision Desk HQ has not updated properly.
This turned out to be a blowout. Yeah. And by the way, a blowout with one very good assembly candidate.
Yeah. No, I apologize. With all due respect, my numbers are Globe numbers, so I apologize for that. Mm-hmm. They were Globe numbers from tonight.
So by the way, I think people should get an explanation about.
Yeah, this whole thing is kind of a debacle in it. Like it really, yeah.
So they have new voting machines, and the first page when you go on and it's got that system where it shows you the numbers and the percentages and everything, that was not picking up the right numbers, and they were producing bad numbers, and it's what they're producing on that particular page that what the Globe initially was looking at, what AP was looking at, and you had to go into basically a PDF.
Mm-hmm.
And the numbers in that PDF were complete, and it was like hiding right in front of you. It was, if you go on their site and you look at it, and I'm getting, and the problem is, and this is one of the problems, and I'm gonna, I'm speaking to some of the old timers out there, where the way it used to be was you had county committee, you had challengers, and you had somebody at every polling place, and at 8 o'clock the polls would close, and the board worker would go and unlock the machine, and it was literally like a hand crank, and they would crank this machine open, and then they would crank out these giant sheets of paper with purple ink, and the person would read the numbers, and the Democrats and the Republicans in the room would take down the numbers from their district. And this was before the cell phone days, and they would go to a central place, somebody's house or some restaurant or a campaign headquarters, and they had this old-fashioned thing it was called a tally board. And you would read out the numbers, and they would put the numbers up on the board. If you watch The Last Hurrah with Frank Skeffington, you will see like the tally board of all tally boards, but it was a blackboard, and they would put the numbers in with chalk, and somebody would be sitting there adding them up. And the bottom line is, we used to get results faster that way than we do today, because today they have to transmit the numbers, and they have to feed the stick in, and it has to all come to a central place. And what happened in Bergen County is, because they have the new technology, the old school way of doing things, people leave at 8 o'clock. They don't stick around. So nobody really knew what was missing, what these numbers were, and that was a problem. And you had people from both parties calling municipal chairmen saying, "I need numbers from your town," and the chairman was saying, "I don't know." And I'll call the clerk's office, and they'd call back and say, "Nobody's answering." And they didn't have this backup old school way of doing it. So in reality, Joe Logano was never close. We all could have called this race a couple hours earlier. Mm-hmm. It's just that we're only as good as the information coming in. So, and I'm getting numbers, in the ways that I get them from on the inside and mine, and I'm getting I'm getting things and I'm calling around and my numbers aren't matching up with other people's numbers. It should not have been so confusing, and they need to get that fixed. And, at the end of the day, Joe Lagana, Micheline Adeye was not a close race. Lagana ran. I guess, Joey, we're skipping. We'll end in 16 as long as we're in 38.
Right, yeah.
At the end of the day, Lagana saw his numbers from 21, and he said, "I'm not letting that happen again." And he became serious, and they ran a different kind of campaign. And I think at the end of the day, you'll see about $2 million there. Lagana was up on broadcast TV. He wound up doing everything right, but he's still not getting credit for his win because we still don't see all these numbers. And Paramus is, that's an important thing to point out here is Paramus, which used to be a swing town, this is now a red town. And the last Democrat at the local level lost. And this is Joe Lagana's hometown, and he did a little bit better in Paramus than the locals did. But Paramus is no longer a base there, and they're going to have to look for other votes. And if this district continues to swing, more, I think this is a district that could still be in play in 2025, depending upon the circumstances. And Barry Wilkes, great candidate, and I'm not just saying that because his daughter-in-law, is the co-writer of Stomping Grounds with Dan Bryan on the New Jersey Globe. Barry Wilkes was a good candidate. He did a lot of, he raised more money. But he was working harder. But at the end of the day, the same thing that happened to Barry, and to other Republicans in the state happened to Barry Wilkes. He couldn't compete with the money that was being spent against him, and his party was woefully inadequate when it came to vote by mail and early voting.
So, I mean, I don't dispute that Barry Wilkes may have been a good candidate. He's currently in fourth place. He trails his fellow Republican, Gail Horton, by 14 votes, which, I mean, obviously 14 votes doesn't really matter, but there's certainly not an indication that he was pulling the kind of support that no one else was. I mean, this is just Republicans in general, regardless of who they were or what their strengths were, just weren't winning the 38th district this year. And I think that's sort of segue into the 16th district, which has one of the clearest narrative arcs of any district in the state, where it was Republican-leaning district redrawn in 2011 to be more competitive. Democrats smelled blood. Took them a couple years to really start winning. Andrew Zwicker flipped an assembly seat by 79 votes, as we said before, in 2015. Roy Fryman flipped another seat, Jack Ciattarelli's old seat, in 2017. Andrew Zwicker flipped the Senate seat in 2021. And this was sort of the question was, well, can Republicans turn back that clock at all? And they really wanted to, and they really didn't. I mean, this district includes Princeton, includes South Brunswick, it includes Montgomery, it includes Hillsborough, which is getting bluer. Yeah. And it just, Republicans and Democrats both have this idea of this district as one of the quintessential swing districts, and both parties treated it like that. But then it didn't really behave like that in the end. I mean, what were the totals? Zwicker won 55-43. That, I mean, it's the same story where you can talk about, quarterback after the results and think about what might have gone differently, how you could have avoided getting outspent, how you might have been able to find a different candidate other than Mike Pappas, the former congressman who lost to Zwicker in 2021. But even that's probably not overturning a 12-point victory. This is just a pretty blue district, and it behaved that way.
Yeah. And the counties are behaving as you would expect them to. Pappas carried Hunterdon by 9 points. Zwicker was 81-17 in Mercer. He was 65-33 in Middlesex, South Brunswick. And Somerset was a little bit closer, 53-46 for Zwicker.
Yeah, he went everywhere except Hunterdon. I'm looking now.
Which that's definitely all you need in this district. I mean, it's not quite where like Joe Biden is able to get in a district like this, but you don't need Joe Biden numbers to win.
Republicans also underperformed with the advance vote too. In 2021, they may have 23% of the advance vote, and this year was only 22%, so they dropped 1% in terms of advance turnout.
Yeah, the Dems were every day was another 300, 400, 500 votes coming in the advance. This was a habit, and the Democrats were also pushing their voters to vote early. They were motivating their voters to vote early. It was clearly a campaign-driven effort.
I will say really quick. Overall turnout and advanced turnout are both lower this year than 2021. So it's not one of the other swing districts we were talking about where advanced turnout exceeded 21, but not overall turnout. So just an interesting thing I just caught with my eye.
Do you all think that Michael Pappas, former congressman, one time, political boy wonder, was he a good candidate? Was he the right guy to run here? Would they have been better off with, with the Hunterdon County commissioner director who didn't have that same name ID as Pappas, but maybe would have had maybe sort of a fresher take on this?
I mean, Pappas had some negatives that I think another GOP candidate might not have. And the biggest thing, I mean, one thing that Democrats hammered him over and over for was his anti-abortion views and votes for his one term in Congress. And so that I don't think helped. But I mean, once again, you just this is another district, by the way, where we had an assumption about who is the stronger candidate for the assembly beforehand. Mm-hmm. In this case, it was Ross Traphagen, who's a Clinton town councilman. He wins in a swing town, and he was running a pretty good campaign. And then the other candidate was Grace Jang, who I think people were thinking she was probably going to do a bit worse than Traphagen. She did better than him.
Yeah, a few hundred
yeah.
votes.
Which, again, not a big difference. I'm not saying that this is some vast gulf in candidate quality, but it's more just it's evidence that candidate quality was not the name of the game here necessarily.
Yeah.
And I don't like, maybe someone not named Mike Pappas could have narrowed it a tiny bit, but we're talking
Traphagen, I think will turn out. I think you'll see him again.
Yeah.
And
he's got still a pretty red county to run in if he wants to become a county commissioner or something.
Yeah,
but David,
he has a route to.
And remember Leonard Lance, really strong vote getter over the years, but he lost for the assembly too the first time he tried. So I think you'll see Ross Traphagen again, but I think this is another issue where it's money. And Micah, go ahead. I cut you off, and then
No, it's okay. I was just there was some thinking by Republicans throughout much of this race that they thought that they could win one of the assembly seats or both of the assembly seats. They thought that they had a better shot than maybe the top of the ticket there. They thought that maybe because one of the assembly seats, if nothing else, was an open seat, right? So they thought they had a shot. And to that point about whether or not Pappas was the best that the Republicans were going to do, Pappas's abortion views very clearly sunk his assembly running mates on that issue. It really allowed the Democrats to frame that entire campaign around Pappas's very pro-life views.
That is
from from conception, and it opened up the entire ticket to that criticism that another candidate might not have.
Yeah. That's a fair point.
I think when you look at this district, we talk about, this was drawn in 2011. First of all, drawn, a map that was a Democratic map, but the reality is the Republican governor at the time, he didn't really want a Republican legislature. He sort of liked, being the big fish in Trenton and like the narrative of I'm able to deal with get things done with a Democratic legislature in a Democratic state. But the reality is, this district, when it was drawn, once it got Princeton and once it got South Brunswick and they lost Bridgewater, this was sort of inevitable. And in 2011, the Republicans won by about 2,500 votes. It was not a blowout. And then one of the Republican assemblymen, Pete Biondi, who was in leadership, he passed away. And they had a special election in this district in 2012, a presidential year, an assembly race in a presidential year turnout. Republicans picked picked a woman named Donna Simon. She won a convention over Bill Spadea, who was living in Princeton. And what wound up happening is the Democrats ran for the second time a teacher named Marie Corfield, who, if you remember, she was, this was at the time where Chris Christie was at war with the NJEA, and the NJEA said, we're going to try and we'll try and peel off an assembly seat there. That special in a presidential year was hugely close. Democrats came within, I'm looking now because I don't have it memorized, 980 votes of winning that. And Marie Corfield got 72% of the vote in Princeton and 62% of the vote in South Brunswick. And then then you had Christie running for re-election, and he was doing well and he carried them in. But by 15, this thing was just over. And in 17, they almost lost the Senate seat too. So, this district, you look at Hunterdon and you look at Somerset, and maybe if you tilt your head and squint just a little bit, you'll recall the old days of Leonard Lance and Millicent Fenwick and Ray Bateman and Wesley Lance, and you'll see this through more of a Republican lens. But the bottom line is Princeton is just a huge anchor there, and I'm looking now, unless one of you has the numbers, can get it faster for me. But I want to look at those Princeton numbers. Zwicker won 81% of the vote in Princeton, and he won 65% of the vote in Middlesex, and in the Somerset portion, which is bluer than it used to be, he won 53. So the only place that Pappas won was 54% in Hunterdon County. And, except for, and that doesn't include Lambertville, which is sort of the Democratic stronghold of Hunterdon County, if there is a Democratic stronghold. I think, this is probably a very long way, about way of saying it, but I'm sort of looking at Pappas with 54% in Hunterdon and wondering if we're a decade away from Hunterdon being politically competitive too, the same way that Somerset has become.
I mean, I think that if Democrats are doing well in the 2024 presidential election, they could carry Hunterdon as soon as then. And that's not really here nor there for state level politics, because there's always a lag on that. But I think Donald Trump could absolutely lose Hunterdon. One very quick thing I'll just add, because I got a text about this related to the Grace Jang versus Ross Traphagin thing. It is worth noting that this district has a pretty substantial Asian population, especially in Montgomery Township, South Brunswick. And Democrats had elected an Asian American legislator in 2021, Sadaf Jaffer, but she's retiring after just one term, and her successor, Michelle Drulis, is white. So Democrats had an all-white ticket, and Republicans did not. I don't think that will matter all that much for competitiveness of the district going forward. I think it's too blue for that, but that is at least worth putting out into the world, that this is a district where I imagine a lot of the population growth is coming from Asian Americans. And that's a big voter base. Are you guys ready to move on to the final category of districts?
We are, yes.
So I think that we can talk about these three in particular, even more so than the last three. I think we can talk about these three as one big package, and that's 21 in Union County, 25 in Morris County, and 39 in Bergen County. We talked about these a little bit in a package last week too. And last week we were all, I think, universally a bit dismissive of Democrats in these districts. All three of them are districts that voted for Joe Biden by a decent margin in 2020, especially the 21st district, which has gotten very blue in presidential races. This is Westfield, Summit, all these towns that have just rocketed left. Although, David, you're going to have a point about how they're maybe not rocketing left so fast. Mm-hmm. And then Jack Ciattarelli won all of them in 2021. And I think all of us saw Democrats who were not raising very much money, who are not getting any outside support, who are not getting the kind of chatter that you would usually see in a competitive race. We said, well, it'll probably not be a blowout, but what could really lead to a Democratic victory here? And I mean, indeed, Democrats did not win any of these districts, but they came unexpectedly close. I think I can speak for all four of us in saying that we're all a little bit surprised at how Republicans did in a lot of these, particularly the assembly races. The 3 state senators from these districts were all pretty much fine. John Bramnick won by, I think, 9 points, and Tony Bucco won by 8, Holly Schipisi by 10. Those are pretty respectable. But when you get down to the assembly, it starts getting a little dicier. Mm-hmm. So I'll throw out a couple of numbers. In the 21st district, Michelle Matsakudis has 26.2% of the vote. She's in second place. And Chris Weber, a Democrat, actually both Chris Weber and Elizabeth Gray have 23.6% of the vote. That's pretty close. You got really similar in the 25th. You've got Christian Baranko with 26.2% of the vote and Diane Salvatore with 23.6% of the vote. And if you expand this out to a two-way race, you're talking about, like, I don't know, 52 to 48 or so. And what is your reaction to that? And I think in particular, the big question that people are going to be asking is, what is your reaction to that as it relates to the 2025 race, when all of these assembly people will be up again without the senators at the top of the ticket?
Who's the president of the United States going to be?
I think I have a torn because the
Democrats. Your sound is going weird. Yeah. You muted yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. I'm a little torn because, thank you for patience there. I'm a little torn because, on the one hand, the Democrats can certainly afford to be competing everywhere. They certainly can afford a big map. On the other hand, I'm loath to criticize their targeting decisions were so on target this time, right? The districts that they chose to play in, they won. And so, they were so successful in the cycle that it's hard to disagree with where they chose to play and not play. But if they chose to expand their map and they chose to make the Republicans defend in more places, they certainly could give some of these lawmakers fits if they wanted to, and make them concentrate closer to home if they chose to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think these are, you look at 21 and John Bramnick, who I said last week I expected he would run for governor, and he's certainly moving in that direction and not wasting any time at all. But if he doesn't win the Republican gubernatorial primary, this will be the first time that Nancy Munoz has been involved in a assembly campaign that doesn't have John Bramnick on the ticket. John Bramnick was her husband's running mate, and then has been hers. And 2025 will be the first time she doesn't have Bramnick. And whether you like Bramnick or you don't like Bramnick, he has developed his own independent relationship with the voters of his district, and he's the anchor there. And I look at Nancy Munoz's numbers, and she's running about 500 votes ahead of Michelle Matsakudis, who's only been there 2 years. And that's, you'd think that an incumbent might be a little bit more, but even with that, this district, you're going to start looking at, again, most important thing is who is the president. And, if Donald Trump's the president, 21, I mean, you might be looking at a retirement from Nancy Munoz there. This could be, dead woman walking in terms of that. And she's got to pay a lot of attention to local politics. And today it was announced she's going to be the Republican budget officer. And so now she's in this position of she's going to have to be partisan in that role at a time where you point to people like Vince, the model of Palestina and Guardian and Swift, where, or Gopal, where you have to be able to say no to your party in order to survive. Whether, Lagana did it sometimes, Zwicker did it sometimes. Munoz is going to be sitting in these budget meetings, and And anything less than full-throated opposition to a Phil Murphy budget is going to cause her a problem in her own caucus. But the not voting for it, not being able to deliver things for her district, we could be sitting here in 2 years and saying, well, she lost because she was just, lumped into this typical Republican legislator who just toes the party line in Trenton. I don't know what what's Nancy Munoz going to do in this, as the head honcho of the Republicans in the Budget Committee when they start talking about funding Planned Parenthood. She can't disagree with her party there. She can't lead that fight, even though she's pro-choice, because that's a condition of having the job, is she's got to act in that role sort of in accordance to the party wishes. Well, what's she going to do when she gets back to Summit and to Westfield and is defending a caucus that wanted to pull funding for Planned Parenthood? I think she's, maybe her decision to take, and I don't know, I have no idea, but maybe her decision to take this Republican budget officer leadership position, could be I'm going to have 2 years as the lead person on budget, and then that might be the end of it for me, and I might be done. But there's a scenario where she's in trouble. It's the Aura Dunn in the 25th. She doesn't have that. She's, I don't know what's going on with the leadership there. I don't know if it's going to be Aura Dunn getting the whip position or not, but people don't care about whether you're the minority whip or something. This budget thing is a higher profile. Aura Dunn still will have the ability to disagree with her party and play more to this district. You start heading up to District 39, 25, another one. They won't have Bucco on the ticket this year. Next time, not this year, but next time. They're not going to have Bucco. And Bucco had to run, this was tough for Senator Bucco because he got, moved into the minority leader position sort of earlier than he planned, and immediately had to take over a statewide operation that people expected him to win seats. This wasn't his slate. This wasn't his candidate. I don't necessarily think this was his fault, but he's, you can't be everywhere. And he had to take on this role of running around the state, raising money, going down to South Jersey to appear with candidates. And he wasn't able to, do the all politics is local stuff that he used to do in the 25th. But
that sounds like a recipe that's ripe for Steve Sweeney and Ed Durr, huh?
Yeah, I mean, that's what it is. So you've got, you got some of these seats. I don't think there's any doubt that they're going to be, people are going to look at them. I think you may have a higher quality Democratic candidate taking a look at these races in the next cycle, depending upon who's in the White House, depending upon, where Phil Murphy's 8th year numbers are and how he's going out, depending upon who the gubernatorial candidate is in 25 and whether they're going to be able to do that. But this might be a more attractive nomination, especially since you've seen the Democrats can figure out how to raise money. One legitimate point I think here is 51 Democrats is not as pleasant for Democrats as when they have 45, because the caucus has become unwieldy. Sometimes they become uncomfortably big, and it becomes much tougher to manage them. The good thing for Democrats, they got Craig Coughlin, who reelected today. There was really no question about that, but he's going to become the longest serving speaker of the assembly in New Jersey history. So he's going to be managing a caucus of 51 for a guy who knows how to be speaker by now.
Maybe 52, maybe. Yeah. Andre Tapp.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. But it's, and this is, and I want to talk, when it's appropriate about some hyper local things that happened in those train station towns and in that area of the state and what they mean. But this is recruitment, and this is going to be Republican incumbents who, they have to look at these numbers today and say, I've got a potential problem, and I can't afford to take the next year off. Maybe it's stepping up their fundraising. Maybe it's continuing digital in an off, in 2024 in order to build up their name ID, because quite frankly, there's they're not going to get name ID unless they take that under their own control and do it for themselves. So, I think there's a lot of moving pieces here. And there are some people who've got to look at these numbers. And Joey, as you talk about 21, 25, 39 and where they're going to start to go. But you can't not go if Brandon Umba's lead holds.
Well, he doesn't have a lead if he gains
you're right. Well, yeah. But if put it this way, if the calls done by very astute organizations, if those calls hold and Brandon Umba's going back there, that's probably your number one targeted district in the state.
Yeah, is
the 8th, and they have Democrats have been going at that for the last few cycles. This may have been caught even a little bit off guard, and as we talk, and I don't have to rehash the VBM stuff there, but 8 may be the number one prospect. You could be looking at Republicans playing defense in 8 to 10 assembly seats, and that's now you're talking about where I'm almost coming back to where I was in 2018, which is that people are wrong when they say that New Jersey is not a two-party state. And Micah knows what I'm going to say because he's heard it a million times, and Joey knows it, and a lot of you out there have heard it. But I'm now getting close to being back at a point where I say that's not right. That New Jersey is very much a two-party state. It's just the Republicans aren't one of the two parties, and you've got these divisions among Democrats and between the moderate and the middle center wings of this party, and more a group of young progressives joining the legislature, replacing some older, more moderate members. That caucus is going to be interested in passing some legislation that maybe leadership doesn't want. Joey had a one-on-one with the governor Wednesday morning and asked him if these new margins in the legislature will embolden him to maybe pass some bills that he didn't previously think would pass, and the governor was sort of, I don't think so. I think we're let's get liquor licenses done. So we're gonna look at we're gonna see two things, and I'm there's a long-winded way of me coming back to tell me who the president of the United States is going to be, and tell me who the Republican and Democratic candidates for governor in 2025 are going to be, and then we can say if these are really competitive. But any incumbent in these districts, any incumbent that won by less than 4,000 votes, ought to be watching their back and not thinking that they're going to have an easy time of it.
I think all of us except for you are fading. So why don't you just barrel ahead into talking about macro races?
Micah, I don't believe that with Micah. It's been a long week, and I didn't go to sleep on Tuesday night, and I'm the oldest one here. But all right, I want to talk about
Ryan's got
Ryan,
Ryan's got his hand
Well,
raised.
I'll say this like right before we get off.
Sure.
It's about LD8.
Yeah.
I really like it, so I'll save it for last. So go ahead, David.
No, go ahead. I want to hear LD8. So
All right, no, so I took the liberty of just now. That's why I've been quiet for a few minutes. Sorry about that. I took the liberty of compiling the provisional vote for governor by the new LD8. So I have the breakout for that if everyone wants to hear.
I
All right. So in 2021, in the new LD8, there were 1,308 provisional votes for governor. Murphy won 624, Chitterelli won 675, and there were 9 for other candidates. So Chitterelli won 52% of the provisional vote in LD8, and Murphy won 48% of that.
Wow. And that's district wide, though. That's
yeah. In Burlington, it was. Let me do the margin. In Burlington specifically, let's see. It was.
You fit in so well here with this group, Ryan. You really do. This is great.
In Burlington, let's see. In Burlington, it was 50% Murphy, 49% Chitterelli.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the break-even model, then.
Yeah, roughly.
I mean, yeah. So that's about twice as many provisional votes. And there was about a 50 vote margin for Chitterelli. So then you have that, and you get a 25 vote margin for Brandon Umba. I'm just doing really, really back of the net. A 25 vote margin for Brandon Umba, and then that cuts down from the 27 vote lead for Andrea Katz, and you end up with Andrea Katz ahead by 2 votes. This will be great.
There's one other piece, which are the 200 Atlantic VBMs, right? So Hamilton, very Republican, but VBM, very Democrat. So we'll see what happens with
we'll
that.
just casually get 100 each from there. And
So in Atlantic County, though, Atlantic only had 172 provisional votes for LD8, but Chitterelli won 66% of the 172, 113. So, and
I think I saw that these are VBMs. They're not provisionals, right, David? Aren't there? I think
provisionals aren't counted until a week later. So they don't get counted yet. Not until 144 hours till poll close or something like that.
I think I saw 75 VBM, 75 provisionals from Atlantic. 200 VBM.
Yeah. So the reality is, I didn't sleep on Tuesday night, but Andrea Katz and Brandon Umber are not sleeping tonight.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I can send them my provisional votes by governor.
Sleep tight.
Yeah.
I would be.
So, David, do you want to quickly run us through some train station towns?
So what I became fascinated by on election night were 2 things. One was District 30, and we've exhausted that, and the other were local level municipal wins for Republicans in Democratic strongholds along the same train line: Milburn, Summit, Westfield, Cranford. These are hugely important towns to the new Republican base. New Democratic base. Phil Murphy, won them, by 25 points in 2021. These were Malinowski towns against Kane. And when you look at the depressed turnout that you had in urban areas of the state, you could argue that Phil Murphy got reelected on the backs of these highly educated, highly informed, liberal Democratic towns in suburbs, in places like that. And Milburn, I think Mikey Sherrill and Joe D won, close to 70% of the vote there. Malinowski, I remember when he beat Leonard Lance in Milburn, and that was a Democratic wave year. He got 75% of the vote, and 2 Republican candidates for township committee won by a 2-to-1 margin. Summit now has a Republican mayor and a Republican majority on their common council. And I'm very proud of the fact that I understand the difference between a common council and city councils and township committees and all that. Westfield, complete sweep. I mean, and Cranford, these are closer races, but if it holds, it'll be a Republican majority there. So you sort of wonder what happened. What's this anomaly here that Gopal's winning 60% of the vote, but Republicans are taking, these towns. And the reality is these are these are local issues. They are controversial redevelopment plans, downtown redevelopment plans that not everybody in fair housing issues that not everybody in Millburn and Summit and Westfield and Cranford were necessarily happy about. And that caused this seismic shift. Good candidates. I mean, Summit, they found a local physician, not really political, not, just opposed to their local redevelopment. Westfield, this is Shelley Brindle's midterm election, and things could not have been any worse for her. And from what I gather, she wasn't really hearing the voters that they weren't happy. This was an epic fail. And I don't think this is a realignment. I don't think these towns are going back to being Republican strongholds. But what we're seeing here, and I think this is my takeaway, is overdevelopment is a bigger issue than people realized. And you sort of wonder whether, and I'm, I don't know the answer to this, but you sort of wonder whether school curriculum and gender identification and gas stoves and electric cars and Joe Biden and Phil Murphy, and whether this was whether Republicans in other parts of the state, mainly candidates for the legislature, miss the boat on development, overdevelopment, and changing the look of charming downtown areas that they didn't want to, which is the reason they moved to these towns to begin with. Is because they like the way it looked. And I'm gonna end this with just like hyper local. I don't think it gets any more local than this. Westfield voted down by a 2-1 margin a referendum to install AstroTurf on the ball field. And that's the fact that it was proposed and the people proposing it didn't see that 2/3 of the town didn't want it, that this was an issue that caused people to come out and vote. You sort of have to, you've got to do what Gopal does. You got to do what Palestina does, what Testa does, which is stay in these local issues. And I'm looking, so this is my parting comment on Millburn and Westfield and Summit and Cranford is if these local issues don't get fixed, what if a Republican candidate for governor is now doing 10 points better in these towns, and Democrats still aren't able, Rasmussen still can't get the votes out in Newark. All of a sudden, you're starting to shift the math in a state that historically likes Republican governors as often as they like Democratic governors.
Yeah. So in District 16, the Republicans did try to move a lot of their focus. Now, as you said throughout the night, David, very limited funds. So, it didn't break through, but they tried to focus on overdevelopment, and they tried to blame it on Democrats in the legislature, Democrats in Trenton. Yeah. It didn't work in that case, but it's different than an individual project in an individual town that, that's what drives votes. That's what changing a community, the face of a community, is what drives votes in a way that the state legislature never could. That level of interest just won't be there the way that it was. But I agree with you. A gubernatorial candidate, particularly a Republican one, could just snatch this up as an issue and run on this in a big way. I don't know that they're going to have great answers because, we're stuck with some of this development and some of the mandated development and the affordable housing development. And so there are no easy answers. But to rail against state policy that's allowed it to happen, certainly they could do that.
So I think that we should end on a more overarching note than just local races. I think the local races are super interesting. But I want to give everybody
politics a chance. Is local. That's pretty.
No, all politics is local. I agree, but I want to give everybody a chance.
This is what happens. Joey Fox moves to Washington. in July, and he's gone Washington. And this is it because
the only office that matters is the presidency. These past 3 hours I have found deadly boring, and I don't care about any of this.
And by the way, this is one of the things that makes politics and even covering politics great. And I don't want to end this with another tribute to Joey Fox, but how long ago was it, Joey, that you were standing? You were seated in the gallery of the U.S. House of Representatives, that you were standing, in the, right outside the door after they were voting for Speaker of the House. This global story of American politics, the biggest story, of this fall, and then you shift seamlessly to being able to speak with authority in every legislative district in the state. And now, I guess I found your breaking point. You can go to the highest level and talk about Speaker of the House, and you could get down to some of these small towns in the legislature. But when I throw AstroTurf ball fields in Westfield at you, that's where you've had enough.
That's it.
And you can't take it anymore.
Yep, you found my limit.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because I'm such a city guy, and I look at these suburbs, and why aren't there skyscrapers there? You idiots?
Yeah.
How are you voting against this?
Wow.
And that is just gonna kill Democrats if they.
Well, luckily I am.
And I don't mean you. I mean the perception. The perception of unity and the perception of bill density is gonna. David's right. This is an Achilles heel.
But so I wanted to give everybody the chance to give, as if we're at a debate, to give something more of a 30-second to 1 minute closing statement on just sort of what your thoughts are on this. And David, if you go over a minute, I do have the power to mute you, and I will use it.
Fine. I will say this, and that is, Phil Murphy gets something out of this election that you can't take away from him. And that is, he is the first two-term governor in the history of the state to pick up seats in his 6th year in office. And someday, people are going to be going through 50 years from now, 100 years from now, through the Fitzgerald's legislative manual, and they're going to look at this and they're going to say, how did they pick up seats? It's in the governor's midterm of a second term. Phil Murphy has that. That's a great bit of legacy for him, and you can't take that away from him.
Point made. Who wants to go next?
I'll go. So, I mean, just from a numbers perspective, I'd say from my estimates, I think, roughly total ballots cast are 1.69 million right now. I think, on estimate, there's about 67,000 provisionals statewide that'll be counted based on 2021, 2022, plus about 4,000 to 6,000 vote by mail ballots that could still come in. I think we're going to reach 1.75 million once the election is certified, which will be 80% of 2013 and 2017 gubernatorial elections, which is pretty impressive in my opinion. 100 and 150% of 2019 total ballots cast. So I think this is actually a pretty high turnout election compared to other midterms in New Jersey. So well done, New Jersey voters. So,
Micah, what say you?
Well, I'll go with summaries on what Republicans have to fix if they want to continue, if they want to be one of the two major parties, right? Recruitment, we talked about fix recruitment, fix vote by mail, and fix money. And those are easier said than done, but they've got their scorecard. They know what they have to do if they want to compete in 2 years and beyond. Because, I mean, that's another thing we didn't talk about. I won't keep them going, but this is a very mature legislative majority. I mean, David, we didn't get to talk about this, and we will someday, but we're going to go on 27 years and beyond now, at least in the Senate. That is an extraordinary length of time for one party to hold the majority with really no prospects of anything but that in the future. So Republicans have some work to do.
We should just do a live stream like every couple of months where we don't necessarily talk about specific events, but just sort of like, here's our thoughts now.
Right.
We can get all that kind of stuff out of the way.
We'll be busy in June with the primary.
Yeah. I mean, we got convention season, you got primary season.
Fire commissioner. We're going to do it before the fire commissioner elections.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my closing thought is, let's say hypothetically that Andrea Katz ends up winning. She holds this tiny lead. Then the breakdown in the state assembly will be 52 to 28, and the breakdown in the state senate will be 25 to 15. And eagle-eyed observers will notice that that is the exact same margin in both chambers the Democrats held leading up to the 2021 elections. So 2021 is universally accepted as a disaster for Democrats. This is just this was the year of the undone disaster. This is them taking back Steve Sweeney's seat. This is them taking back those 11th district assembly seats. They didn't win back the 2nd district, but they made up for it with at least 1 gain and maybe 2 gains elsewhere. And the question for me now that I think we should all be asking is, well, how far further can Democrats get? They had this high watermark. They lost it. They got back to it. Now what? And so we'll be covering it.
Put an abortion amendment on the ballot that can drive.
That can certainly do something. Yeah.
Yeah. And I got to tell you, one thing, and it's something that it's getting discussed in some areas where Democrats are getting a little fatigued over these off-year elections where they can't control turnout.
Yeah.
I'll make you a bold prediction, and that is sometime soon, Democrats are going to say, well, we've got these majorities in the legislature, and we're going to put a referendum on the ballot in November of 24 when all the Democrats are voting, and we're going to say New Jersey should not have these off-year elections, and they're going to move the governor's election. They're going to start moving governor elections to presidential years, and then Republicans will never win the governorship again.
Yeah. That's definitely a thought for sure. But I wonder if they cracked the code this time with their voting by mail. I mean, I wonder if they figured out how to do off-year turnout.
Yeah, that is kind of the thing of winning large majorities. It's, they want to keep those, but also they maybe have figured it out anyways. So why would they add the new variables in?
Eventually, somebody's going to figure it out on the other side. I mean, it would be, it'd be really scary if they didn't.
Well, anyway, if they do that, we'll be around to cover it.
Yeah.
But we're not going to be around to cover it right now because we're all going to bed. Thanks, everybody, for watching.
Thanks.
If you're somehow still here right now, more power to you. If you're watching in future days, thank you for watching.
Thanks, Kevin Sanders.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having me. Good night, guys.
Good night.
Good night.